If everyone could take their seats, please. Tonight is Tuesday, March 13th, 2012. It is a special meeting of the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201. Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is public comment. I have one card. Jason Hancock.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Jason Hancock. I know some people wonder why I speak with my wife on the board. It is because I believe we all have the right to express our opinions, our concerns, desires to our elected officials, and should be not looked down on when you voice your beliefs. As a taxpayer, a voter, a parent in District 201, I'm here to express my concerns and opinions about where the district is headed. This board is scheduled to make a multi-million-dollar short-term decision tonight to improve the buildings at 3 out of the 4 active schools, Manning, Miller, and the high school, which desperately need improvements like the library at Miller, additional classrooms at Manning, the windows at the South High School, and also to spend funds on 2 separate projects at the South Building. I support moving the administration to the South Building to free up space at Manning to improve the learning environment. This should be done with minimal costs, as it does not take millions of dollars to move fewer than 10 people and give them appropriate space to work, particularly in an existing building where we have been leasing the space to District 99. What happens financially when District 99 leaves and we move back into South School? They pay us $70,000 plus a year to be there, which helps to cover the costs of having the building. If we are not renting space, then there is more money out of pocket annually. Does that matter? I think it does. That's a teacher's position. That's programs throughout the district that could be cut if we don't have that money. Balancing the budget is a tough business. What are you going to do? Was this thought about or discussed before voting on using this building? The capital improvements that the Facilities Committee voted for related to the short-term recommendations did not have any costs associated with them. If they did, I know for a fact, at least for me, the recommendations would have been different. Creating this false scenario to this committee was a disservice. Furthermore, the board took the final recommendation and did not complete a cost analysis to see if opening South School is fiscally feasible. A month ago, this board passed a motion to move forward with opening South School this fall at whatever cost, disregarding a well-thought-out and documented plan from the superintendent, the staff, and considered not just facilities, but also programs and funding hurdles that would result in a better facility and an opportunity to serve additional kids. The superintendent wanted to do this by 2013. The board again voted no on this with a 4-3 vote. My concern is simple. Manning, Miller, and the high school short-term projects make sense and are needed immediately, or are a one-time cost utilizing this bond money. The impact literally helps hundreds and hundreds of students. But South School has to be improved with the bond money, and then we have additional ongoing costs to operate and function like the other schools, which means more money needed every year out of our annual budget, which, by the way, is estimated to be negative over $400,000 just this year alone. We have been in deficit spending for almost a decade. When is this board going to address and solve this dilemma? In my humble opinion, this should be the discussion. Not let's open another school to benefit kids that are already being successfully served at Manning. The public has not been given a real reason to use more tax dollars we don't have to fund a building we don't need with very little time or plan in place for this transition. I would like to thank you all for your service and remind you that you serve the entire district. I strongly urge you to reconsider the superintendent's plan for the early childhood in our district and to focus your time and energy on the district's continually growing deficit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Do you have a?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Lynn Banks. I'm a resident of Westmont. My son went all the way through the school district from K through 12. My concern as a taxpayer is why we're even thinking about opening South School. I just heard about it recently. That's my own fault for not following closer on the school board. But according to projected enrollment compared to what our actual enrollments are, it seems like we're about dead even with 2005. And we're 300 less than, or 200 and some less than what they projected it to be this year. I don't understand a reason for needing South. I understand if you want to move some of the administration. My understanding with that is also that Marker School District had talked to us, Holmes School District had talked to us about renting space, and that kind of got dropped. I don't know. It seems to me that our money would be more wisely spent on improving the schools that we are using and that we do need and fixing programs that might need more help. I don't understand why we don't have a balanced budget, but I can tell you as a taxpayer, I do not want to see any more money going towards something that's not absolutely 100% necessary. My concern is that some of the people on the board and also some of the residents of Westmont were so upset when South School closed that that's their only agenda is to get that school reopened. I really hope that this is more of a smart decision, a well thought out decision than an emotional one. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Hi, my name is Mike Graham. Sorry, I'm still out of breath. I had to rush to get here. I was an active member of the Facilities Committee, and I promised the Facilities Committee that I was going to put together a budget of what it would look like for different scenarios for 133 South Grant, South School. I have enough to hand out to you guys if you'd like to see it. I finally got it together today with a little help from the administration. And then if the projector's available, I could put it up for the viewers to see.
If you want to put it up there, just
Yeah, sure.
do it from there.
I'll make this available. Okay, so part of the Facilities Committee's job was to evaluate different scenarios for what to do with that location. And I'm a subject matter expert in facilities management. I manage quite a few buildings in downtown Chicago. So if anyone's going to do it, I might as well. I had to make quite a few assumptions and gave it to the administration because of other priorities. It took them a little bit to help me in vetting the numbers. I used industry standards. Today we were able to tweak the numbers to be a little bit more appropriate to the school district based on the way that your cost structures work. I laid out 6 different scenarios. One is status quo to keep your tenant in place there. And based on the numbers, the total cost to the district is about $5,000. It's $46.39. If you relocate the administration from Manning to 133 South Grant and leave the third-party tenant in place at the same time, the net cost is the same, $46.39. If we relocate the administration to 133 South Grant and use it for other district uses, like I think that you guys are talking about putting a grade level center there, the total cost is $71,639, or a net cost of about $67,000. To relocate the administration to a leased space, so to like an office building nearby, which is one of the things that the district was looking at, or the facilities committee was looking at, it was $79,639. To relocate to a leased space and terminate the tenant that you have there and shutter the doors, winterize the building, similar to vacated houses throughout Westmont and everywhere else where they literally drain the pipes and allow the facilities to go into a freeze mode safely. The total cost is $91,000. And then if you relocate the administration to another active location, like with the facilities committee, the principal of the high school was saying that there was space over at the high school for a temporary move, 5-10 years, depending on how the demographics work within the school district. And the total additional cost is $16,688. Now that's assuming that you have your tenant in place, that you have in place now, right? And so there's quite a bit of backup. I'll make this available to each of the board members. Maybe I'll send it to Kevin and you can distribute. But the only assumption I had to make was the rent, which was, I assume, $69,000. So if it's more, then the net difference is less. So in each of these scenarios, the short version is if we shutter the building for a long-term purpose, don't sell it, don't change the use, don't get rid of it, hold on to it, but just winterize it and hold on to it for a future need. Continue to do landscaping in the budget is to keep the property up on the exterior. That ends up being the most cost-effective solution if you no longer have the tenant. So that is a key piece of this. If you have the tenant, then you're better served relocating them to 133 South. And if you don't have that tenant, then shuttering the building, just financially, is to not do it. So, and I should let you know that all other expenses associated with it are static. So if you're going to renovate, the renovation costs exist at the high school. They exist at 133. So that's a static cost. Furniture, static cost. I'm assuming that no changes within programs. So all of your personnel, same. Engineering, I found out that the way the district works their expenses is that it's a sunk cost throughout the entire district, not just a particular building. So I did not take into account the additional engineering costs to be at 133, which don't exist currently, because it's a fixed cost within the district. Do you have any, it's a lot of numbers, I'm sorry. Any questions on it? I know that Kim's looked at it. I don't know how closely Kevin's looked at it.
Could I just have a copy now? I mean,
Sure.
I certainly can't respond. I don't think anybody here can respond to it, Mike, but thank you.
Does anyone else want to?
Okay, later.
Sure, I'll take a copy.
And time is up. Mike.
And I assume my time's out, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay, then the next, I'm sorry.
I'm Judy Wilson. I'm also a resident of Westmont. 4 children have gone through the system. I just wanted to make it clear that the board has engaged the services of Mr. Cashman. I was at the other meeting that he made the presentation to. And as a resident, regardless of what side of town this school is on, that makes no difference to me. I'm very happy to see a underused building that is our newest building in the district, and I'm very happy to see it be potentially used for early childhood and kindergarten and administrative offices to move more room over at Manning. I'd also like to suggest that possibly in a year or two that be expanded to all-day kindergarten, because we all know that you don't go into kindergarten with almost some prerequisite to early childhood or some type of nursery school type thing. The children that do have all-day kindergarten in our surrounding area as of the end of January, they were on Easy Reader Book 1s, and we don't have that barely happening until they go into first grade. So I'm happy to take Mr. Cashman's recommendation. I'm happy that we have the newest building that doesn't require mammoth work as far as repairs, and I'm happy to see that it could be used for the students of the district, and hopefully that program would grow and we could use all of the rooms available. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Okay, then the first item on the agenda, personnel recommendations. Are there any comments before we? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the employment of John K. Jonak as the principal of Westmont Junior High School for the 2012-2013 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
And before we go on, I'd just like to thank all the parents and the staff who worked on the committee to bring Mr. Johannek to our district. The next item, the chair will entertain a motion to appoint Kristen Krestel as the permanent principal of Manning Elementary School as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay. First item, the information item. Mr. Cashman, Summer 2012 Facility Project Discussion.
Good evening. What I wanted to do is first kind of give you an overview. We've been doing a lot of background field surveying in all the facilities that we're have planned projects for, the 4 of the 5 schools, getting our engineers to look at the existing systems. We've then worked with staff to develop a number of conceptual designs and have been working through different iterations for each project. And then we have basically taken our current designs, which are close. There's probably going to be some minor changes as we go forward, but taking the current designs, and then we basically updated the estimate of cost based on the current information that we had. In some cases, it was easier. Manning and Miller, we have drawings for the existing building. We do not have drawings for the upper level south portion of South School. The original 2-room schoolhouse, nothing exists from that, and then the drawings we have for the addition in the 50s do not reflect what's standing there. There was either extensive changes during construction where they, in a way, mirrored everything, or there's a set of drawings that were lost over time. We don't have those. So we spent a lot of time above ceilings, poking around at South, especially trying to understand what's really there. An example, in some cases where they're showing a concrete roof structure instead of wood frame. And we need to then, kind of accommodate that as we go forward to make sure that we have all the proper fire barriers and construction materials in the system. What I think I'll start with, if they can bring up my laptop. Is I'll move through this and give you an idea of, kind of explain the current designs. Feel free to interrupt and I can kind of explain it in greater detail. And then after I kind of give you an overview of each of the different project areas, then I'll go through the summary cost estimate, and then you'll see that there's a detailed cost estimate for each project where we break down all the different trades, materials, and quantities. This first drawing is at Manning on the first floor. And this is basically the current footprint that's occupied by by a portion or most of the administration. On the lower left, what's shown as the new classroom is currently the business office, and that's being renovated and turned into a new classroom. We're taking the existing area that's for the superintendent, the business manager, and superintendent's secretary, and are basically demolishing that in total. And then we're also having to steal some space out of the library because the width there is only the width of an office and isn't wide enough to have a computer lab. So The wall that runs east and west in the computer lab adjacent to the library is a little further to the east than where the current wall and stacks are on that, if you're familiar with the west wall of the library. We have then made some changes to basically integrate that computer lab and library together. There's a wall that connects the two with fixed windows and doors so that they can be used together. But then we've also maintained, there's an original corridor that's listed as a vestibule here that's to the right of that new classroom. It's kind of unused space right now. No one really goes through there. There's some lockers back from when it was a junior high that are being used for storage. We're basically using that as a secondary entrance into the computer lab. As we went through with staff for both the computer lab here at Manning and also at Miller, that was really a design criteria that they wanted in both locations, so that if something was happening in the library and a teacher wanted to bring a group to the computer lab, that they could do so without interrupting what's going on in the library, but then they could also use them together. So you'll see that is kind of common for both of them. This next view is basically kind of a three-dimensional view of it looking from the southeast. So the lower right, or upper right, or I guess lower right is basically the library. Lower left is the new classroom. And then you can see the hallway that basically enters into the computer lab on the south. And then the computer lab, the wall between the two spaces, you can see has fixed windows to provide supervision. The hope is that there's times when, one person, a librarian, could basically supervise both spaces and use them together, but that also have acoustic privacy, that door could be closed. You'd still have visual supervision, but you could then have another function going on there and not disturb the library area. There's basically 30 stations in the computer lab. We integrated storage. There's kind of a storage problem at the Manning Library. There's a lot of carts and things that are just being stored there because there's no other place to put them. So we've taken a little space out of the corridor that goes into the computer lab to make some storage for AV equipment, book carts, other things that are used around the school, but with just lack of storage space, they need some area for that.
Steve, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I think I know the answer to this. I mean, I do know the answer to this, but so you did work with the librarians?
Absolutely, yes. In both, we've had multiple meetings with both librarians, with Nancy Battaglia on technology, and really talked about, we kind of went back and started and said, okay, what's working today that you want to keep or enhance, and what's not working at all, and how do we go forward? Obviously, the challenges are more extensive at Miller because they're basically in what was a storage room, and it's long and skinny space. It has older furniture, and it has some restrictions, and so that's a little more interesting for that design process. But we basically went through that both on the computer lab and on the library, and also talking about the classrooms. And you'll see when we get to the second floor at Manning, we looked at, I think we're at concept I in the alphabet, and just those classrooms, looking at all different types of scenarios as far as how many classrooms, how big, student services space, single, double, and trying to balance the best possible end result. Also at both campuses, we were involved with the principals, with Kelly and Kristen to get their input to make sure that what we're doing makes sense to everybody. And then Mike's been involved extensively with us trying to make sure that what we're doing, that his understanding of the buildings is very good, so we want to make sure that we kind of take advantage of that, and especially at South, because there was a lot of surprises there.
I did have a couple questions about that particular building. In the drawing, the handicap accessible piece, are we touching that? It almost looks like there's access from the library to the outside.
That's the existing.
So that exterior piece won't be touched?
No. We've actually been working with Mike to bring in some concrete restoration contractors to look at the underlying structure from the 60s. It has some spalling, so we're working with him to establish some numbers, and whether that's just a small project that he takes care of or something we do later, that's the only thing.
I know that ramp has had some issues with the people who use it. That's why I was asking.
Correct. That's not part of this project, but it's certainly a good issue as far as Manning accessibility in general is a big issue.
And I don't recall, is echoing here, the offices where the administration currently is that currently central air?
There is a small residential unit that was basically put in there that is providing air conditioning for the two, from the superintendent to the business manager and the superintendent's secretary. There's one unit there. that's basically stuck in a storage room. And then there is in the corner of the classroom, you can see on the top left corner of the classroom where there's a closet, there's an existing air conditioning unit that serves the business office, and we're keeping that unit so that we can air condition that new classroom.
Would that be sufficient for the computers?
No, it is not. It's in the wrong spot. It's basically in the middle, so it's in a terrible location, and it does not meet code. It doesn't bring in the amount of air that we have to. So if you look on the top left corner of the computer lab, there's a little spot that says mechanical. That's a new vertical univent that basically brings in outside air, provides, we tie into the hot water and or the steam and electric, and we're able to basically heat and cool that space. The existing unit that takes care of the library is basically above the ceiling when you come into the library, and we're going to maintain that unit. That's going to stay in place.
Okay.
There might be some modifications on the far west end, on the end of the ductwork runs, but we don't think we'll have to do much to that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just, Kim,
Yes.
the concrete work that Dan was talking about, that's on our project list, right?
Correct.
That's on our other list,
The
right?
other list, yes.
Our day-to-day
Right.
facilities needed, okay.
So there was a placeholder. We've done a lot of concrete restoration work at other clients, and I got Mike in contact with somebody that I thought was quite an expert in the work and was very good at estimating costs, and we're trying to determine and have a more accurate number on that work.
And I think if memory serves, that's pretty high on the list, isn't it? Didn't that end up as one of the number one items?
It was on the top 5.
First group of things we need to address.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so this next drawing, this is the second floor of Manning. And basically this project area, and if someone has questions, I have on here also just the original existing floor plans for the building, so if you're kind of wondering, excuse me, how this all fits together, I could jump to those if you need a reference point. But this area basically on the left is where the existing stair is, and it runs to the far right, which is the 1960s addition. And it's currently a special ed room, a computer lab, and a gifted area. And it's the original science area. So there's, along the outside wall, there's enclosures around the steam radiators, about 6 to 8 inch enclosures. Then there's base cabinet that's been abandoned in place. And then you'll see in the rooms, there's actually raised platforms that are from back when it was a science lecture room or a science lab. It was originally 2 spaces. It was a long science lab that ran east and west and had a platform for the teacher along the east wall, or the corridor wall, and then the room to the north was a science lecture room, and it had a platform on the south wall, and that back from the day when it was a junior high. What we're envisioning here is basically demolishing the entire area. There's an existing non-load-bearing CMU wall that separates the original 2 spaces, and then there's a gypboard partition that was put in at a later date that basically split the science lab into a couple parts. And what we looked at, as I mentioned, we were on concept I at least, I think, when we left this, and this was what the team felt was the best possible, was to create 2 really good sized classrooms that are basically kind of at the high water mark of the 900+ square foot classrooms, at the best ones you have at Manning. And you basically have 2 that are in the low 900 square foot range, and then a nice size student services space at the far left end or south end of the space. We worked with Kristen about kind of crowding and issues at Manning, so you'll notice on the far right where the original opening is into that classroom, we've eliminated that because she felt that that would really improve the traffic flow. There's kind of Grand Central Station there where the east north-south corridor intersects the east-west corridor from the 1960s edition. That closing that opening up and then using the existing opening that was for the adjacent classroom would then serve that north classroom, and then we basically are eliminating the double doors that went into the old science lab and are creating 2 new entrances, ADA compliant entrances into both the classroom and that student services space.
Can I just ask one question? 'Cause
Sure.
I think I know the answer to this one again. So this is along that side wall there, that's that northbound, and then those other classrooms, like the 4th grade classrooms, are off that way.
Correct.
Correct? That's what
Correct.
we're looking at
Yeah, just
here?
where the title block is would basically be where those other
Where
classrooms are.
the other classrooms are
The reading
facing
room
north.
and then the
Okay.
4 classroom areas. We also talked a lot about lockers because they're doubling up kids in lockers. We're looking to see if we can salvage the lockers that are down on the first floor. That's yet to be determined if we could move them in one piece. But we basically have shown here on the east side of the hallway adding lockers. I believe there's 54 additional lockers so that we can kind of help with the student population, especially since we're moving them ultimately from kind of the south end of the building up to the north end of the building where they would not have lockers near their classroom.
Before you leave Manning, based on the drawings, Mr. Cashman, we are not touching currently the early childhood room, what we currently call early childhood. We won't be updating that or making changes to that?
Not at this point, no. On the first floor across from the business office, that's correct.
No, further down the hall. Out of the building towards the gym.
Okay, yeah. No, we are not.
And then in addition, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, that was it.
Yeah. In addition to the work on this space, we've got 12 new AC units going in.
Correct. Correct, we have...
electrical service upgrades to carry all that?
Correct, basically upgrades on panels, distribution, and then bringing the power to those locations, and then window units installed, and that's in the cost estimate.
So, just as a slight tangent, window units are a sort of a short-term to medium-term solution.
Correct.
What's the long-term solution to that problem? Because as you know, through two committees, it's not likely that we're going to knock that building down.
The long-term solution for Manning is basically getting away from steam, converting to hot water. The boilers that we put in will replace the one boiler you had with 2 additional boilers. They're designed so they can be converted, and then basically putting in a chilled water plant. Having a central boiling plant and chilled water plant is the most economical way to address the building. I mean, the window units are surely a short-term solution.
So when you say short-term, what do you think that means in terms of short? What's short?
Until you're ready to do that project. I mean, the units should last, 10 years, but whether you intend to, do that project sooner or later, I mean, there's a number of units similar, then they're large, they're not residential size window units, they're bigger units, and that's what we're basically putting in. Trying to be economical now, but it'll provide, cooling in those spaces.
Yeah, it's exciting, at least for now.
And then that's also included in the cost estimate for Miller.
It's going to be 77 tomorrow. Can you put him in by?
I know. This is a tough year for buildings and grounds directors because people want to switch over to cooling now, and everyone's hesitant because it's early in this cycle, and then, they'll switch over and then we'll get snow. This is a 3D view of the second floor looking from the southeast. So you can see the smaller room on the left next to the stair. That's the student services space, which is in the mid-200s. And then we have the 2 classrooms that are really nice-sized classrooms. The classroom that's across the hall on the east side on the north end, that is a 900-plus square foot classroom. So these would be really 2 great additions to Manning.
In terms of critical path, there's some abatement work as well. Where is that abatement work?
At this building, we have abatement work on both levels.
Okay.
The second level that we're looking at right now, the platforms, we have a asbestos tile that's underneath the carpet on the platforms. There's likely tile underneath the casework. There's also likely asbestos on the pipe insulation that's buried behind the casework. So this whole area basically is a project area where they'll go in and take a 2-week period of time to basically remove all those materials.
So that's a 2-week upfront
correct.
process. Okay.
And then on the administrative level, we also have some asbestos tile in the administrative area. I think if I remember correctly, the classroom is good. The window sills are positive. And then there's tile in the administrative area. And then we're expecting that we'll find some pipe insulation also. The ceiling tile in the library and the administrative area is clean. So we have basically 2 project areas at Manning. Okay, now we're moving northwest over to Miller. This first drawing, in this north is up. This is basically looking at the west end of the first floor. So this is the basically where we're creating this new library media center, computer lab, and kindergarten classroom.
Are When you say the first floor, you mean the one where I walk up the stairs to? Or
No, the one that you walk down, yeah. The garden apartment.
Okay, very good.
Yes. This end, actually, what's nice, and one reason this is a much better location for a kindergarten classroom is because of the grade of the site, this location is truly at grade. The kindergarten classroom does have direct exiting, which is a recommended practice for all kindergarten, and it's actually an ideal practice for even first grade classrooms to have direct exiting. So in this scenario, when this was built, there was not any plumbing at this end of the building when this went on in the 70s. There is currently a drinking fountain and a sink in the space that's on the top of this drawing on the northwest corner of the building. We traced the pipe. We contacted a plumbing contractor that works for the village, for the town, the school district, and we were able to trace the pipe and find that there is a sewer line running out to Travi. So that on the south end, we have the main electrical primaries that come into the site. Their exact location is unknown. The original drawings, when they showed building this, actually showed that they were building on top of them, which I hope they did not do, but has been done. So because of that, that was just a much more risky location for the kindergarten classroom at the south. So in this scenario, this is, I think, the third or fourth concept we've done in this area. We looked at having the library in the middle and the computer lab at the south. This scenario made more sense. The library needs more square footage, and we were able to get the proper exiting. There's two small spaces in the lower right-hand corner that we're able to take advantage for the library. So you have basically in the top a kindergarten classroom. On the top right, which is currently a workroom, we're creating a storage room and a ADA compliant and juvenile-sized restroom for the kindergarten room. We're basically reusing the existing plumbing for that drinking fountain and basically service sink that's in that room. It's a nice-sized kindergarten room, and then it has the advantage of a window in the southeast or the southwest corner, and then also a glass door in the northwest corner. And then obviously the original door into that space we're reusing. The computer lab's in the middle. As in Manning, we have 30 stations there for the computer lab. It also has a direct exit to the corridor, but you'll see on the south, the bottom of that computer lab, that's a wall that's similar to Manning that has a combination of fixed windows and a door that can be either closed or left in an open position depending on how they want to use the two spaces. In the library area, we basically have a circulation desk, we have the library tables, a reading area with some raised tiers, mobile shelving, and we're working on right now with the librarians to make sure we have the proper shelving areas, lineal feet of shelving that they need for the collections. This next view is a 3D view of the same thing. So you can see on the lower left, that's the library area. You can see the wall into the computer lab. And then at the top is the kindergarten classroom.
Steve, don't we have some very nice accordion walls in these rooms right now?
You have accordion walls.
That's okay. I thought you had said they were at the time. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're accordion, whether nice is the word or not. I mean, accordions are, we put one in at the junior high to basically close off the stage area. They're effective in closing a space. Acoustically, they're very poor performers.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we were going to be able to utilize them anywhere else in the district, that's all. I didn't know if we'd be able to salvage them in any way, if they were in good shape or not.
We haven't. That's a good idea. We could investigate that. I mean, we're going to have two of them that we could salvage. I mean, they function. I mean, they've been performing well for 40 years.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they work. I mean, you'd be surprised how few of those will work after this period of time.
Okay.
Accordion ones, especially because they're lightweight, they tend to be more forgiving. I think people have taken good care of them. I'm sure Mike's done plenty of repairs on them, but they're the originals. We're taking some of the area out in that, if you're familiar with Miller at that end, there's kind of a wide corridor space. It's kind of a strange area. I think it was kind of a breakout area. We're trying to use that for some additional storage for all that AV equipment and stuff that Denver has at home. And it should be a real improvement for the library and the computer lab to have them both together to really have a true library media center for Miller and for Manning will be a big improvement.
I have a question for you on that.
Yes.
I may not be understanding that space 100%, but I know on that most western piece of that building, it's all cinder block, and I think in that accordion area that Mr.
The interior partitions are concrete block.
That room had some heating and air conditioning issues.
It does in a way. I mean, it has, it was electric heat, and it has air conditioning. The unit ventilators are humongous. I mean, that's the best way to describe them. They literally, in these concepts, as I described in the computer lab for Manning, we're replacing the 3 unit vents with vertical unit ventilators. If you've been over at the community room when that unit ventilator comes on, I mean, basically, they are truly cheap mechanical units. They're inexpensive, that's why you see them a lot in school, but they're very simple. There's a louver, there's a large squirrel cage fan, and that's it, and controls. So you have no way to mitigate the sound. Whether you're putting one brand one in today or one that you had from the 50s, they're all about as noisy. They have what's called a vertical unit ventilator, where in a way it's the same type of unit where you're able to provide whatever type of heat source you have, whether that's electric, hot water, steam, and then you can have air conditioning with a condenser like those units have. But you have the ability to basically duct out of the units up high and put in line ductwork, and then basically you're able to control the sound. So that's what we're proposing in these spaces. Here it was really driven by a couple things. Number one, noise, but really secondly, with the footprint, how big those units are, it really limited whether we could even put a library space in here, because you lose kind of a whole wall. I mean, they're almost 4 feet deep. So, and that's because they have those compressors in there, and what we're showing here, these units are basically like about a 30-inch square, 7 feet tall, and you're able to put them in a smaller area, put them in a closet. Usually we will, in this zone, there's basically 3 of them. There's one for the computer lab, one for the kindergarten classroom. So we're basically replacing those units. And that's, they're nice. I mean, they're much quieter, and it's still not a really expensive mechanical solution, but it's a step up as far as acoustic performance. And also, you gain space. It was a net gain when it came to the space.
I see them now that you say that. I guess in a question similar to what Dan had asked about Manning, I don't know if Miller has the same electrical age or the wattage that went into the building that Manning had at one time, and you seem to have fixed that or addressed that in the other drawing. Is there a similar issue at Miller?
For
being able to bring in electric,
for the window air conditioners?
Correct.
That we have in our budget, and basically we believe we have what we need to provide that kind of temporary solution. Fortunately, Miller's not that big, and there's not that many units. Manning, initially, when we looked at it with our engineers, they were doubtful, but you have, because of the additions, there's some redundancy and some multiple services, and they feel like we can get the power we need for the units. So, this is the 3D view. This next view, this is basically the footprint of the old library. So this is on the east end of the second floor corridor, and it's currently, was originally the storage room. And as you come up, that's kind of half flight of stairs. Basically, that area that right now has a couple online catalog stations is where they're going to put the main copier for the school, which is right now over on that west wing. And then basically the space, we're pretty much, the north area, which is an IT room, there's a PTO room, a storage room. We're not really doing any work in those spaces. We're leaving those exactly the way they are. But basically from that north existing wall to the south, which is kind of a wide open space now, we're creating one room in the middle, which is kind of a meeting room for the school, which they're in need of. Right now they meet right kind of almost in the principal's office. That space, if you're familiar with it, outside of the principal's office becomes kind of Grand Central Station. And this would allow for meetings to take place without disrupting the principal's area. And then down basically where the existing windows are, we're creating a small break room. And then basically at the north end, we have cabinets. It's a work area, basically for the school. This is a 3D view of the same area looking at it from the northwest. So on your lower left, you can see basically the work area. There's an island and then basically perimeter cabinets. Similar to what we did at the junior high, basically providing paper storage and the ability to lay out projects and laminators and things like that. A small meeting space that's between the two, and then basically at the north end, some casework on one wall and basically a break area. This next drawing is basically back to the first floor, and this is the current kindergarten classroom. And if you remember when, in the past, I mean, this goes back a ways when we were talking about if there's ever going to be an elevator at Miller to address accessibility, the area, if you're facing Miller from the street, the area to the right of the door is the most logical location where you can hit all 3 levels. I mean, Miller, in a way, is kind of a split-level house. And unfortunately, that would ultimately require you to cut 2 corridors, one on the lower level, one on the upper level, through that area to connect the floors. And so moving the kindergarten allows that in the future to happen. And basically what we're showing here on the short term is basically taking that current kindergarten space and creating 3 simple offices out of it to be for student services, for speech, ESL, whatever needs made most sense to be in that space. And they're basically each a third of that space.
What's directly above that? So you would say if we were to put an elevator in at some point, it would go in this student services one where the bathroom is?
Correct, yeah, on that far end. So you imagine you'd lose, 7 to 8 feet of width there. And then above, there's a classroom.
How would that impact the classroom above?
Same thing. We'd lose a section of that classroom and likely want to look at that whole stretch of area and can we re-subdivide the classrooms to maintain proper size.
Okay.
You know, the walls that run north and south separating classrooms are non-load bearing, so that's a benefit, but we definitely would want to look at doing something, possibly right now. It's amazing how often it changes, but I know over on the north side, second floor on the west end, there used to be some student services being provided in that old classroom space. Possibly that could move to the east end and that could become a standard classroom.
Steve, just curious, I mean, this looks like a wonderful area here. Why aren't we doing the same thing with the one empty classroom that Diane was talking about on the other end at Manning? Where I think it's the early childhood or the First Start is now?
We certainly could. It just was not on our charge, and I mean, it's something we could certainly look at. Okay, so now we move further north in the town to the high school. I got to say, this is one of the most interesting projects I've worked on for you, where usually when Mike and I are walking around and interrupting people, they're not too happy to see us. This is not the case when it came to talking about windows at the high school. I think for the amount of money you're spending, this will probably be the biggest bang for the buck that you're going to spend. It's really interesting. I mean, obviously everyone knows, natural light is a really important part for learning, for workspaces. Everybody would rather have a window looking at anything, a wall, into an old light well. It's better. You combine the lack of windows with a curvilinear form, it's a very disorienting building. And I really think this is going to be a huge step forward. And what we've done is, you can kind of see the darker spots around here are windows, and I'll show you a little more detail later, but we went through and looked at locations, so where could we put them in today in an orderly fashion that would serve the current spaces, but would allow you to potentially, re-subdivide the interior space. Because you have some really large spaces at the high school, bigger than they truly need to be, and if you did in the future, when you looked at, say, enclosing this classroom, you will be able to create net new space. So we basically kind of followed the structural column grid of the building, and in effect, there's pairs of 6 foot tall by 4 foot wide, what are called fixed over project-out windows. So it's an insulated aluminum window. It has tinted low-E glass, and the lower 2 foot section of it is an awning window. It has a restrictor so someone can't climb in or climb out of it, but it allows you to get some ventilation, and we're showing those in most locations. There are a few locations where it's physically impossible, like in art. Mike and I looked at that space. We weren't sure if we could put windows in or not. There's large peninsulas, work surfaces in there. So we felt it was better to at least put in a 4 foot square window to give them some natural light, especially it being art, versus no windows at all. So we've added some like that elsewhere. Right now, we're roughly at about 51 windows, additional windows at the school. And it was just really intriguing. It was really interesting from students. If they were seniors, they were disappointed, but still excited. If they were, juniors or younger, they were really excited. And then the teachers, they were really excited. And I can see, if you taught there for most of your career, this is going to be a big change for them and a big improvement. In simple terms, we're coming in with a mason to basically create in this 12-inch outside wall, it's a concrete block and brick veneer wall, creating a structural opening, putting in lintels, putting in a cast stone sill on the exterior, and then basically, because we're going to be disrupting this kind of outside wall, we'll be repainting that perimeter wall with, the kind of linen white to match existing. We've surveyed together to determine where there's things in the way, whether it's a marker board or an old chalkboard, some low voltage, some power. The sills are about 2 feet, they're 2 feet off the floor, and we kind of did that because all the original outlets are basically 16 inches. They're in the second course of block, and we're hopeful that from what we can understand, that they've been fed from the slab below so that we should not be disrupting. We definitely are carrying a contingency here because we don't know what's in these walls. Mike and I were reviewing, you're familiar with some of the landscaping that's outside, especially on the south. So some large bushes that are up tight to the building. Mike's removing those, and we were able to find even in some cases where there's been some deterioration stuff behind those, and we're going to get at that masonry restoration as part of this because we'll have a mason there working.
So, Steve, just to reiterate, what we're looking at right now is what we're doing for this summer.
Correct.
But one of the things that you're obviously looking at is possibly mid- and long-range plans as to putting in walls in there.
Right.
So where you're putting, so we're not just putting in windows anywhere. What you looked at is where you would put walls.
Right. An example,
walls.
if you kind of look at the northwest corner, upper right, upper left, we could take, some of those spaces, the existing wall, some are accordion partitions, Gary, like you saw at the over at Miller. They're, most of them are kept closed because they're not using it as one big, large group space. You could take 2 spaces and easily create 3 nice classrooms. And the way these windows lay out with the structure, each classroom would end up having 1 or more windows. So it was really interesting. I hadn't been over into the manual arts area since you'd converted those spaces. And that was really, they're great spaces to start with because, number one, they're enclosed. They're not up on the second floor, open acoustically. And they're nice big spaces, but adding the windows there is really going to be a positive for those spaces. And we, over in the area that's currently being used by SACID, there's also some spaces north of the gym, and we've added some windows there, too. So it will, let me move to this next photo. So this shows kind of an idea. If you look at the top right, those are the 2 current window types. So the one on the left is basically showing a 4-foot wide by 6-foot high window unit, and then the one to the right is basically a 4-foot square. The one on the left, that lower section, would be an awning type window. We really recommend and use awnings almost extensively in schools. They're more reliable long-term than any kind of single or double-hung window because they don't rely on, the gravity doesn't fight you. They're very simple as far as they operate. Theft is not an issue because you can literally leave a window open. No one can get in through the window. They'd have to literally break the glass, to get in. So they could break a door. They could come in some other way. And then another thing, there are times when teachers will leave a window open. You can have a rain event and still not get any rain in the building because there's restrictors on them, so they really only open about this much, and the rain will hit the sash and drain off and keep the building dry. So it's also kind of a benefit for guys like Mike, where if you drive the building, you can immediately see if there's a window open. It just catches your eye because of the reflection off the glass being slightly open. In the lower left, this is just kind of an example to give you an idea. This is out near when you first come into the school, when you come in the drive, a section of the outside wall there, and then basically showing it with the kind of spacing that we're looking at. The windows are roughly 5'4" apart, and between each window, like in this case, between those 2 windows on the left, there's a structural column there from the original steel structure.
Bless you.
So in the plan, it looks like you'll be removing most of these larger bushes.
Correct.
They'll be in the way of the window. So, but there's no replacement of any landscaping on the outside of the building in the.
Not currently, no.
Okay.
Landscaping, those bushes over time just got huge. If you keep them smaller so that they're not an issue as far as the police being able to see, is there anyone hiding there or whatever, so you could do some planting. I don't know what your long-term plans were, but I know that some of these are just really overgrown and we're taking them out. We need to take them out. We found one that it really was like totally stuck against the building. As we were able to peel it away and get behind it, we found an old hose bib that had basically like failed and needs to be removed, and the masonry needs to be repaired, and it was hiding that condition because it just grown so tight to the building. And they're tough bushes because you get in there and they're kind of poking you. They're prickly bushes. So.
I'll have to reiterate, I think probably the number one thing that I hear is this piece, that people that have gone to the high school, you know, say, is this really truly going to happen now? So I can't wait to see.
I think it's really going to be, there were a lot that still, I don't know if they really believed it. I mean, because it just seems almost too good to be true, but it will really have a big impact. And, you know, as I think I had mentioned before, when I've done career days, you know, like I guess every other year you guys have those, and I've done it, you know, when the students find out that I'm an architect, that's kind of question number one is, you know, can you put windows in this building? And I think that's kind of interesting for, you know, 18-year-old or younger, that's something they would think and to ask. The teachers, you know, they've been here a while, and I think they just assume that it's not going to change. The window contractor that did the junior high, I mean, he was like, what is that building? I mean, he did not think it was a high school when he first saw it, because it doesn't really give the appearance of being a high school, because it's just so oppressive kind of from the exterior. It will look different. I think it will look more welcoming as a school.
We touched on this idea a little bit, you know, a couple of years back when we were working or considering and then ended up doing the auditorium seats. And you know, the thought at the time was, oh no, you could never do the windows without doing the whole high school. So I'm really glad that, you know, you were able to take a serious look at it and figure out a way to do it, and still down the road we'll be able to do other options should you want to wall in spaces or whatever at the high school, because I think this is going to be a fantastic improvement there.
It was an interesting process. You know, we started getting into it, and I had you know, a couple of my architects looking at it, and they're like, well, now I understand why they didn't put windows in this thing. I mean, it's a curved wall. So what are we doing with lintels? I mean, are we really going to curve the sill? I mean, the sill we can curve because it's a cast product, but curving steel, I mean, you're just kind of, in a way, waste money. But we've talked with some masons about it, and I think we started probably at 5'4" width, and we really kind of ended up squeezing them down, got to where a 4-foot width, and talking with some masons that are working on some projects with us, they felt that that's doable. The delta and the curve is about 3/4 of an inch in the center section. So if you looked up, you'd see that the amount of brick overhang will slightly vary, but it's normal. They've put in door openings, like in the north of the principal's office when, I guess it was a Montessori school, they put an outside door in, and that's a 3'4" wide opening, so it's just 8 inches less, and you can see that what they were able to do and to cut it in. We have a couple different jam details trying to figure out how to do this with the least amount of collateral damage. There's some spots where, there's one location where we have fiber coming in, cable TV coming in, and and there's some existing casework, and we're trying to figure out how can we do that with the least amount of damage. So some windows might look, if you looked really closely, you might see that the jams are slightly different, and that's just because we're necessary, trying to minimize the amount of kind of demolition we have to do to put the window in. But it's still going to be the same with the 4-foot wide window.
I think the view will distract you enough to...
Yeah. Well, that was even interesting. You know, if you're familiar with those kind of open areas, if you walk around like the south portion of the plan, they had, you know, these kind of classroom zones, and then there's a fixed window and an exit door, and they're perpendicular to you. And we, you know, Mike and I, when we were looking at the outside of the building, we're kind of looking at that and going, you know, do we want to put them in there or not? When you go inside, it really doesn't, because you can't see the window, it really doesn't give you, there's a little natural light coming in, but it's not a big benefit. So we initially had them in the drawing, Mike and I walked, we took them out, but then when we walked further, we said, you know, that we should really put those in, and especially thinking forward to whatever you do with that building, it will give you more options, because someone will be able to see, whether it's night or day, I mean, they'll have an idea. Building security, I think, is going to improve, because now you literally can see what's going on outside the building from all these spaces with adults in them. So, you know, if some activity was happening, or say, you know, after school somebody was goofing around, I mean, the chance of them being seen by a staff member and reacting, I think, will be better. So it's going to be really exciting to see how this affects the high school. I think it's going to be a great project.
I appreciate the rendering, because I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't expect them to be this big.
We tried to make, I mean, we basically started at 5'4". We were down at one point going, should we go 2'8"? And then, we really felt, especially after talking with a mason who actually helped us do the cost estimating to cut all those openings and everything, he's like, we could easily put a 4-foot opening in there. And I do think they'll be nice. I mean, like at Miller on the west end, they have those narrow strip windows. They'll be wider than those, but they'll be approximately the width of a single sash at Manning. Those, in those classrooms with a series of windows, those are probably between 3.5 and 4 foot wide. So I think it's going to be nice. And the rendering's crude, but when I was talking about this with Kim and Kevin, they thought, if you can come up with something, it'll just help to visualize what this is going to look like.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now we're headed to the across the tracks to South School, and this is an overall plan of the first floor. Basically, we're not doing really much of anything other than painting and cleaning up the basement level. It's early on, especially when we were talking with Marker, we were going to have to look more extensively at that because we're going to need that square footage. It's a large meeting space. It's valuable. It was valuable when South School was open, and we think it will have a lot of value both for the administration and for any type of student use on the north part of the school. It's another space that they could use for meetings. Linda thought it would have benefit for different types of screenings, functions like that. So I don't have that plan here because really we weren't changing anything down there. We're doing just some cleaning up of that area.
You mean downstairs?
Downstairs, yes. Yeah, the basement level, not the north section. On the north section, on the left-hand side, basically in the top northwest corner, and then we're taking that classroom and the classroom to the south and doing cleaning up those spaces, basically coming in and painting, making sure that we have the right data telecom that we need to make those basically for a 1 year period of time to have that early childhood and First Start program in appropriate spaces. So we're basically, working on those two areas. We're taking the south existing boys' restroom and doing some work in there so that we can have a changing area. So we're going to be doing some modification of that one restroom in the core, basically between the kindergarten room and the gymnasium. From the basically the upper level, up a half a flight, that section is basically the administrative area, and there's basically 3 or 4 kind of zones. The lower left zone is basically, starting on the left is superintendent's office, superintendent's secretary and business manager are stacked, and then basically a business office. And we basically have, of the 4 kind of works areas that are in the business office, 1 we've enclosed. There's some glass and everything, but we enclose it because it's for human resources and payroll, and we need to have the ability to have some privacy and security there for that use. The lower right-hand corner is basically 3 office spaces carved out of that classroom. Director of Technology, Buildings and Grounds, and then a future office space or storage. It might be used initially for IT secure storage. The upper right corner is the existing 2 restrooms. There's a men's and women's student restroom, and then there's a small staff restroom. We're basically changing the fixtures, changing the toilets, the toilet partitions to make those accessible, but we're reusing the existing finishes in there. We're going to have to close up 1 toilet opening in each of the rooms and patch the floors. And then basically we're looking at, this is showing wash stations in each of those, but we actually, to try to save costs, we basically are looking to keep the existing lavatories, change out the old faucets, and then change one of them to an ADA accessible lab so that we'll comply with code, but we're not changing everything out because the lavatories, the faucets are old and have issues, but the lavatory itself is fine.
Steve?
Yes.
Where's Linda's office? Linda Clearwater, does she not have an office in here, isn't she?
Right now, that's on looking forward towards renovating in total and creating an early childhood center on the north.
Okay.
She would then be in a way near that kindergarten class, the current kindergarten classroom. So she's going to initially, at least in this plan, she's staying at the junior high for the first year. And then in year 2, she would come over after the early childhood project is completed. Because in a way, she will be the face of that program.
Okay.
That's where, there's a small office. It was like the old original principal's office that she could use when she comes to the facility. So there's space where she could use, but there's not a dedicated office for her at this point. To the west of the restrooms, one not small, the little small, it was like the principal's restroom. We're basically removing those fixtures and using that as a storage room. To the west of that, there was basically 2 current spaces, the original library and a classroom space, and those are basically a meeting space and a workroom. We looked at a number of different design scenarios, and we felt like this was the best location for a workroom, not only today, but when you renovate the north half of the building, that then it would be something that would be shared by the entire facility. Wouldn't just be an administrative workroom, but would be for the entire facility. So that's basically, if you went through the current pair of doors into the current library, that first section there would be the work area.
So ultimately, where would you put a library when you just sort of have to look at putting the library back in?
In the north section.
Okay, in one of the classrooms?
I mean, initially, we've only had a couple kind of just really rough conceptual meetings to talk about it, but likely, one concept was that it would be near where that current kindergarten classroom is, that we'd have Linda's office, we'd have a conference room, a library area, so it'd be kind of towards the front or the west side of the building. But yet to be determined in detail. Basically, then, kind of continuing around the loop, just to finish, is the current principal's office. We're leaving pretty much alone. There's basically 2 office spaces. There's a nurse's office, and then there's basically an electrical room and a storage space. We're doing some renovation work there, but very minimal. The fire alarm, there's a head-end panel for the fire alarm system there. The current clock PA system goes to that location. So of the first floor footprint, we're doing the least amount of work in that area. Again, back to mechanical, because if you look at when you see the estimate, that's obviously a significant cost. The unit ventilators, it was designed for basically 4 classrooms and a library. So there's currently 4 unit ventilators, and then at some point in the past, they put a small rooftop unit in above the library for air conditioning. The 3 on the south, there's no way to use them in an office environment. If we subdivide the space, we're going to freeze someone or overheat someone. We can't ventilate all the spaces, so we're basically putting in each of those areas, we're taking out the current unit ventilator and we're putting in a vertical unit ventilator so that we can duct out to the individual spaces and provide the proper outside air and heat and ventilation. So we have on the south area, you can kind of see them in the corners, there's a small mechanical closet for 3 zones, one for the southeast, one kind of in the center, one in the southwest corner. In the north meeting room, we are currently reusing that unit ventilator.
Those are heat and cool?
Yes. Okay. They have small outside air outside condensers. And then this building is hot water heat.
Okay.
So
the existing, just to finish that thought, down in the basement level in the west storage room, there's a small air handler with air conditioning that was put in to basically air condition the principal's office. We're reusing that unit. And then the unit that was for the original library, we're reusing that unit and doing repairs. There's just some issues that Mike has up on the roof with that unit, but he felt the unit was in good enough condition that we could repair that exterior ductwork. He basically was having leaks into the ductwork, and we feel like we could replace those sections, insulate them properly, waterproof them, and keep that unit and the one that takes care of the principal's office. And then basically in the basement level, we're keeping the existing systems down there, which are basically just in the basement. This is the same area, but looking from the southwest corner. So you can see kind of the lower section. That rectangle space is basically starting closest to the 2 letters SW and working up to the right is the superintendent's office, business manager, and superintendent's secretary, and then business office for staff members there. You can see the original vestibule, original entrance to the school, and then basically that southeast corner or top right corner is the classroom that's being subdivided into 3 spaces. You can see we're taking out what currently separates the library, the original library, from the classroom, and then are creating basically maybe a quarter of it as a workspace, and then the remainder part is a meeting room. And then the lower left, or kind of left side of the drawing is the original layout and spaces that are the original principal's office for South School. We're keeping all the existing windows. We are adding one window in the office space on the far east side. And then we're cutting 3 openings for outside air for those mechanical units. So the work is predominantly inside the building.
Steve, I have a question. Sure. But are you going to go through the financial stuff next?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going
Because then
next.
I'll hold my question.
I actually
A
have,
couple
Any
quick
questions? Sure.
Yeah, in terms of that design for that space on the south end, what were the biggest deltas from, when we were talking about using it as shared space from the original design? Because it looks similar, but obviously I think we picked up a big
Shared space with marker?
Yeah.
The biggest changes were the principal's office, the current principal's office, we would likely we would gut the entire area because we just did not have enough square footage on this level for office space for both marker and 201. The north area where there's that meeting space and workroom was a smaller shared workroom and office space. So we really had some small meeting spaces, but nothing large enough to have like a kind of a larger kind of community meeting or anything. And then we were basically taking the basement level and renovating that space down there for a lunchroom, storage for both districts, and looking at that current space, and we were contemplating basically trying to split it into halves with an operable partition so that it could be either a bigger space or a smaller space. But we were doing a lot more work down there to fit both districts together.
So with this design then, as a result, we obviously would pick up a much larger workroom than a 1,000 square foot conference room, which is obvious, but this space is really designed for a single user, and for all intents and purposes, once it's done, it's done.
Yes, it's designed for your district. I mean,
Timing, if we start, I believe if we get the space August 1st, I mean, there's abatement and other stuff, and then there's temporary space concerns with respect to the administration.
Right.
How's that going to work?
the current idea is that they would be using the, let me go back to here, the 3 classrooms that are on the north section of the school, on the, starting from that early childhood classroom going to the east, that they'd be using those 3 spaces and part of the gymnasium on a temporary basis from June of this year, the first week of June, until likely around Thanksgiving to when they could move into the renovated area. So they would move over here temporarily. We would likely just be, sharing space. We're looking at possibly subdividing one of them so there could be some privacy. And that would be a temporary home, and then they would move up to the upper level. Looking at abatement going to kind of the third week of, if we're talking August 1st, then we'd be looking at probably about the third week of August that we'd be able to have the general contractor start. So the way we kind of envision it, they would be working at the high school, Miller and Manning, get substantial completion at those 3, and then they would then focus their attention on South.
And the question is, would the abatement be complete by the time that the first bell rings in the fall? In August?
That's actually how we have it currently scheduled.
But it's, okay.
Yeah, because I thought we worked out that date with Camplin Environmental so that they felt they could start. At South, there's basically 2 main abatement areas, if I remember correctly. The southwest corner, which is the original 1920s portion, there's asbestos under the carpet, and there's asbestos tile above the acoustic panel ceiling. And then basically above what was the library area, there's asbestos above there. At some point in the past, there must have been an abatement project in that southeast corner of the school, which cleaned it up, but it actually created some other problems for us where they took all the plaster down, and there's now, we're lacking some fire barriers that we're going to have to basically put back in place. So up above the Right now, you can't really see it because there's a lay and ceiling there, but up above there, there's openings and stuff that will close up. So we have two main abatement areas on this upper level.
So the abatement areas are all up here, so, I mean,
Right.
so just to beg the question, if for some reason the final testing hasn't been completed by the first bell in August, we can still utilize the south space of the building?
Yes. I mean, it's not ideal. I mean, we've done abatement projects for most clients in existing buildings when we've had to because of schedules or other restrictions, but our goal is to have it done before the students show up in those two spaces. And I think from the schedules we saw, I mean, it definitely seems doable, especially that time of year. That right now, there's an uptick in abatement work going the last week of May and the first week of June. It's a very busy time. Bid numbers are coming in for that period of time higher. In August, it's a quiet time. They're not doing any work, so that's going to be a separate alternate bid item or a bid, and we'll probably get very competitive numbers on that, and there's going to be plenty of bodies available for that.
We haven't allocated any dollars for playground or exterior improvement?
No, we have not.
Those are some of the questions I had, and, well, then might as well ask them. When we talked in September, we had a specific breakout of early childhood center numbers, and then we had specific for the administration reallocation. And so I guess the question is, what we now see, now we have 4 plans. So what you have here, it says South School Administration renovation.
Correct.
And it talks about
Let me pull that.
a temporary early childhood program.
Correct. This is not, we have not designed or moved forward on the early childhood project that I believe you're in for a grant for, and, that's an extensive design process, but we have not designed, at this point, where we had that conceptual estimate back then would be where we were looking at, and I think was the basis of what we submitted for the grant.
Yep.
The focus is really just on the administrative area because that was not happening this summer.
Okay, so I guess we still haven't heard about the grant, right?
Right.
Okay.
And hopefully.
Okay, so one of the concerns that I had specifically was, because now it takes, what we had in September, which we talked about, and we had 2 separate breakout of money and how that. So now it is all into one. I have some questions, is like, how is this building being prepared to house these young students? Because one of the things that we talked about, I think, and again, this question is that we need to make sure that even though we don't have a full early childhood program with potentially full kindergarten, partial daycare, that these students are, that these students do get taken care of. And I do appreciate Dan's question about where would we potentially put a library in that, because some of these things, like the one thing is in terms of like playground equipment, because I did see that before we were talking about that in the plans, and I don't see that in here, so I guess I'm concerned about that, especially because that playground is the worst in the district.
Right,
and so,
it has not been renovated.
I really have as much concern about these students having a full year of school in this building with the facilities that they need. So I guess I've asked a lot of questions, but I want to make sure that we do take care of these students and we make sure that they have what they need for their whole entire school year. And so I was kind of surprised not to see something, because in terms of like a playground, I know that you would probably have some bigger plans, but I personally think we should have something that
Well,
eliminates.
it's definitely been, it's something we talked about. Actually, Mike's been working with the playground company that renovated Manning and Miller to assess what's there across the street and to see, what could be done on an interim basis to basically serve the needs of those children. When we talked more long-term about what the relationship between, the future early childhood center and the exterior, the discussion was much broader when we got into, talked about it with Linda and Doris and Rosemary about, could there be one immediately adjacent to the building, not across the street, but immediately adjacent to the building on the west side? Could it be in, let me jump back here, this recessed area, that kind of drive area? So there needs to be a lot of discussion and thought about the early childhood needs, and we just, because that's in the future, at least a year off, that we have not gotten into the details of it. But Mike wanted to see, what could we do in the short term? I don't have a line item in here, but once we figure out what those costs are, we would put it into the budget and carry it. And it shouldn't, it's not going to be, we would not anticipate renovating the entire playground now. We would wait until we truly have a design and a program that's designed from the ground up by the educational experts in the district for what should this early childhood program be. Because it was interesting when we talked to them where they're like, well, across the street really isn't ideal. What about right outside, basically that kindergarten classroom in early childhood? There's a grassy area there between the building and the sidewalk. They were talking from a kind of a program needs that it might make sense to have a small area there.
You mean
in
between
addition
the sidewalk and the building?
Correct. And you'll see it. If you look at early childhood facilities, a lot of times there's spaces directly adjacent to the building for different children's needs. Linda could speak more eloquently to this than I could, but that's, when we talked about it, looking out long-term, that's where we decided, to do something right now in a way on the entire playground would be premature, but we are looking at it so that we can make some modifications to address the needs. We talked about the early childhood space here. Ideally, each of these spaces would have their own restroom, and not just a restroom for a child, but a restroom that's sized with a changing area. We know as we look forward that we're talking about a lot of plumbing work to make this truly an early childhood center. What we're doing on the short term, when I mentioned the boys' restroom, Mike looked at that with Linda and her staff, and they felt like they could do a short-term thing where they'd have the privacy and the space for a changing area for those children, and that it would be fine for them for that one-year period. But ultimately, each space will likely have a space supporting it.
Okay, so I guess going back to the question then, I do appreciate that because I do think that it is our duty to make sure that these students are taken care of.
Absolutely.
And that we do something, because that playground was bad 8 years ago, 6 years ago. So if, I really, really, really feel, I personally feel strongly that we should do something in the temporary situation to try to take care of those students, because that,
If I may interrupt, the playground architect yesterday.
Okay, great.
Reviewed the current configuration, and they're making a proposal. I should have with them.
Great.
The other thing too, just to assure the board, in terms of the actual educational program for those students, we're going to assure that the current experience they have, will be the same at South. It's not, if they have certain specials, they'll have those specials at South. So, we're going to assure that in terms of the educational program, those students will have the same experience that they've had.
Okay, so thank you. So before we had two separate breakouts, but right now, all those costs are in this one that says South School Administration renovation.
Correct.
Okay.
That's just focusing on the administration. It does not include the cost for the early childhood center.
Kevin, just on what your statement you just made, does the current First Start program in early childhood, do they use the outdoor space extensively at Manning? Do they use the playground? What's their utilization of that space? Linda maybe is the best person to answer, but I'm just curious. Do they spend much time outside? Are they there long enough that they're utilizing the outdoor spaces?
We renovated, within the last 2 years, they made it handicap accessible, but since then, it's more handicap accessible. The children can go up. They've made it so that there are ramps, which are swinging right down. So yes, we do use them.
We do, okay, thank you.
Because I would imagine that no matter where we go, the plan is to keep this space, those young kids, early childhood, kindergarten, we're not talking about having sixth graders over there. So the, you know, to the extent that where the students are now, that playground was taken care of at the same time, the Miller playground, the Manning playground. So to have something there for them, it wouldn't need to be totally extensive. Obviously, you don't want to spend money if maybe this grant money comes in, but to have something for these students, especially the ground.
Right.
That cannot be anywhere near ADA compliant for these children that are in, yeah.
So we looked at all the issues that.
Okay, great.
are
That's,
related to it. We should have-
that's wonderful.
And some equipment designs for.
Yeah. Okay, Gren, thank you.
I have a few questions, though, regarding that drawing. And out of curiosity, I seem to recall something about the windows in there being one of the older windows in the building, or in the district. Those windows are fine. They're currently.
At South?
In entirety, yes, at South.
The windows are equivalent to the rest of the facilities.
Does the front entrance, or the two entrances, include cameras and some sort of security?
They will, they do it in this budget.
And the entrance that you're referring to as the early childhood entrance, it doesn't have a vestibule that the administration does. Is that, what is the reason behind that?
It doesn't have a vestibule?
You don't have the double door situation?
We haven't touched, the intention is in when you create and renovate to create the early childhood center, that area would change dramatically.
But that would be the next set?
Absolutely, yeah. When we talked about it, I mean, we had, you know, it was interesting just, you know, Linda's view of it and how, you know, the day in the life of it really being an early childhood center. Right now, like you say, you come in and there's really no supervision of that area. The wall that opens currently into the kindergarten room, we really envisioned being a really glassy enclosure. You know, we talked about having a waiting area where, you know, parents and children could wait there. And I mean, just to comply with current code, when we renovate, we'll have to put a vestibule in because it's required by the Energy Conservation Code. Right now, those doors open and, you know, the wind blows through the building. So that's in the future project.
On the north side, that stairwell over by where the administration will be, because there's going to be, if the library ends up in there, children would be in that space. Is there something going to be addressed with that open stairwell?
The library would not be in the south portion of the building. It would be in the north portion of the building.
So there wouldn't be children over
No,
there?
that would truly be an adult area. The thought is once that you go forward, that will truly be the main entrance, that people will come on and enter that building from the west, and that truly just the visitors for the administration would come from the south. To separate the two functions so that we, you know, you might have seen the budget, we have some signage and, you know, really looking at that. We're going to have to do something for year one, and then as we go forward, look at it separately as far as security, supervision, all that. But it's in the future project.
Because we have.
Except that the future project is 2013, right? So, I mean.
Correct.
That's like around the corner.
Right. Well, and it's something, I mean, to create an early childhood center, which you currently do not have within your district, I mean, there needs to be a lot of really detailed educational discussion by your experts about, you know, from the ground up, what should that be? How should you best serve these students and the community? And that we had a couple initial meetings about it, and it was really exciting to kind of just think about that for their point of view, because right now they're basically using existing spaces in an elementary school to deliver those services, and starting, in a way, kind of starting over, you'll be able to do a better job of it and provide those needs, you know, to address accessibility and what is the program going to be. But it was exciting. We looked at the gymnasium and we talked about, could we take some of the space and still have a large open space, but you don't need a full, you know, gymnasium for an early childhood center. So we looked at that as being net new space that we'd renovate the interior of it. So that project, that's why that budget is, you know, $2 million, in excess of $2 million to renovate that area, because it's going to be an extensive renovation and it's going to have some expensive components like a lot of plumbing. There's just the plumbing in those restrooms. It's all slab on grade, so we're going to have to rip up all those slabs, and basically any place you're putting a bathroom is going to have a kind of a big ticket to get that plumbing to that spot. But it's what you really need to address those specific needs of that student population.
But right now, those doors, and I don't know if they still are there, but it wasn't just like open doors. There was a lock, and you could buzz in and all that. So
right,
that's not,
and that's what we will do on the interim for the first year.
It's not like it's just open doors.
No, correct. No, I just mean there's not a vestibule, so when you open the outside doors, you don't have a 7-foot vestibule and another set of doors.
Right.
And actually, like on the, at some point, I don't know when, the doors that were the vestibule on the south side of the building were removed. We're putting those 3 doors, new doors in so that we can have a vestibule and have the ability for someone to come in and then be buzzed into the building and have a secure building.
Well, like all the buildings, hopefully someday will look like what the junior high currently has.
Right, exactly.
Which none of them have other than the junior high.
Yeah, I mean, like the high school, I mean, supervision there is like crazy. I mean, we even, when we did this, looked at the high school, we're like, can we somehow do something with visibility? And right now, until you renovate and really look at that principal suite for the high school, you can't improve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I got a couple more. The fire extinguisher, the fire item, fire suppression, we updated that this past year, so we don't need to touch that?
Its fire alarm system
Correct.
was replaced, and we're modifying the zone that we're working in. We'll salvage the existing, the head and equipment, and everything's going to be fine, and that's why we're not touching that. And the devices, basically the heat detectors, smoke detectors, those will be salvaged and reinstalled, and then we'll be providing new because we're going to have more spaces than we currently have.
That just, you don't show it as a dollar item, so it's not something.
Oh, no, we have a dollar item for fire alarm. There's no fire suppression. Fire suppression is
Okay,
a sprinkler
I see.
system.
I got you.
Yeah, there's no fire suppression there.
And then the costs that we are doing as temporary, we're trying to recoup, we will intentionally try to recoup as much of that as possible in the permanent. We're doing some things temporary, the bathroom and the park and.
Yeah, and I mean, it will depend on what the design, I mean, right now, we're, it will just depend, but we're not really, spending an enormous amount of money on this temporary solution because we don't want to spend money and then throw it out a year later.
And then Mr. Carey had said something about making sure the same things. So like the die cut, the laminator, copier, those will all be reimbursed or reproduced for this building as well?
Right,
Yeah,
we'll have all the
we'll have
equipment.
a work area that will have those.
And we'll have a dollar item to that at some point.
Well, the copier and things like that will be, we already have a copier in the business office, so that will go in the workroom. We don't need 2 copiers in a building that size. Okay, laminator and some of those things we'll have to be purchasing for the programs, and so we know all those things, and we've asked, we're working with the staff to make a list of all the items that they need so that we have equipped space. And again, the thinking was, we will be doing the vestibule there on the west side and things like that so that they have a separate entrance. But right now, everyone's going to have to go through that district entrance for security purposes. And then once, Linda and Nancy Shoemate move over and everything, then we'll set that up appropriately, have a waiting area out there again for students who are coming in for, walk-in speech services, those types of things, people waiting for maybe IEP meetings, whatever. But that's where we located the workroom where it is so that it's easy access, so we didn't have to duplicate that space, because that wouldn't be a good use of our space. And so we can incorporate that and use it for the business office and for the school portion.
Okay.
Is the lift on that stairwell staying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is, basically there's I believe it's a 15-page cost estimate that's based on, the previous one, we had to rely a lot on guesstimate square foot costs and everything because we didn't have a design that was developed enough to truly do takeoffs of doors other than assuming a certain number of doors. So this is based on takeoffs. We worked on this, our firm together with Executive Construction Inc., who's a large general contractor and construction manager who helped us prepare the previous estimates. And then it's been a work in process. God knows how many revisions we've made to this thing, but it's a constant kind of refining tool where we develop it, then we'd look back at it, we'd double check quantities, we'd see to make sure that we're not carrying something twice or being too conservative. Our hope is that these are conservative numbers so that once we competitively bid this, which it's quite a competitive bidding environment out there, that our hope is that we're going to come in below these numbers. It's a challenging, cost estimating is really kind of an art because you want to basically try to get the glass just about half full, half empty, and not be overly conservative or miss something. And usually what happens is you want to win the war, but sometimes you win battles and you lose battles. And what was always interesting when we actually open up bids, we'll compare where the line items came in from the bids to what we estimated. And it's interesting. Some cases we might be low on electrical, but we got great numbers on mechanical, and they wash each other out. So we went through this in detail with our engineers, with our contractors. We solicited subcontractor input on specific trades to make sure that they felt that what we were carrying were corrective. As late as last night, we were getting additional cost estimate information in. So this is first kind of a summary page, and we show the gross square footage for the different project areas, the previous late September high-low estimates at that point in time, and then our current estimate, a square foot cost based on gross. And that's, in some cases, it makes a lot of sense. Other cases, it's a little softer because it depends on what you're renovating. An example would be where we're taking that kindergarten room at Miller and we're subdividing into 3 classrooms. That's not nearly as extensive as a project as what we're doing like in the library area. So, even though we're counting that square footage, it skews the numbers, but it helps us, it gives us another tool to see, okay, based on these contractors' current bidding and what they're seeing on their bids, where do they believe on a square foot cost these numbers should be? So that gives us some numbers there. The windows, obviously, that doesn't really factor in. And then we have the delta from our previous estimate. Then for each of the project areas, this first one's Manning, it's basically we have some initial data up front about the areas existing and proposed, and then basically it's organized by Construction Specification Institute divisions, and you'll see in here where we have either it's a square foot cost where we're calculating something, in this case a square foot of demolition area. In some cases, if it's a LS or allowance, it's a lump sum. We know we're going to do some concrete patching, but the extent's unknown. In other cases, like in the masonry here, we specifically worked with the mason to get numbers to do these types of openings and what they would be bidding, and we're able to carry those numbers. So it's organized by the different divisions, kind of starts with demolition and works its way through finishes, specialties, furnishings. In some cases, you'll see we'll carry nothing if it doesn't apply to the project area, down through plumbing, HVAC, electrical. Then we get to general contractor costs, which are basically like general conditions, insurance bonds, cleaning, record documents, and then basically that gets to what would be the bid amount, and then there's obviously owner costs to do any project. We initially previously we were just carrying an architect guesstimate about asbestos. We've met with your environmental consultant. They've done testing of spaces. They've gone back and retested areas where things seemed a little odd about what their original test results were, and then they gave us updated numbers last week for both the abatement and for the project management and testing portions of those works. So we carry 2 different line items for each of those. We took previously design contingency was 5% because a lot of unknown. We're down to 1. That could be like an example of this is Manning, but 1%. I mean, maybe we're spending that $7,000 to upgrade a portion of the playground because we want to add that. And basically, once we get to the end, we drop that out completely. For any renovation project, it's important to carry some type of contingencies for unknowns. And then we have basically subtotal all those costs. So we have basically backup sheets, 3 to 4 pages for each of the buildings for Manning, Miller. Some items like architectural fees are based on the total project, so that if these were individual projects, our percentage rates would be higher, but it's basically factored on the total size of the project. We also looked with our construction management ally as far as general conditions. If we looked at this as a total project and the duration going from June into November, so there's going to be higher general conditions costs because you're going longer. But what are those costs, and does it make sense across the entire district? Our intention is to have 1 superintendent and then likely a working foreman at the different locations, but we'd have a full-time superintendent setting up a home somewhere here, likely in an existing building in some project area that's available, and then basically once they get into fall, they'll be living at South to complete that project, likely using maybe the basement area as their field office versus paying the cost for a trailer. So I'd be more than happy to talk in general terms or look at specific items.
I have a question kind of along the lines of the playground. On all 4 of these locations, are there items that are not priced out yet that you know? So for example, we've been meeting with the playground folks to look at South. Or is there any other things like that that are going on that really should probably be in this number?
Not that we're aware of. We've tried to...
That's the last kind of holdout item.
I mean, it wouldn't be being truthful if I didn't say that every day we're like, wait, hey, what are we doing with those, like I mentioned, those lack of fire barriers at South. All of a sudden we're like, wait, where's the framing? Where's the JIP board? Where's the fire stopping to address that? So then we went back, took those quantities, upped those to cover that. We initially were, carrying some costs that were too high for where we're renovating some restrooms. And then we looked at that and said, oh, could that be higher? But this is as comprehensive as we can be at this point in time with everything we know. It's a very, getting from initial concept or like, I'd like you to build this house or this building to going out to bid, it's a growth process. We have probably for each of these buildings right now, a dozen drawings or more, and that will be doubling and tripling by the time we issue these for bids because it just gets more and more information. We'll likely have, our project manual has been started, but will likely be 200 to 300 pages thick for every material and system that's in the building so that we make sure we have it specified, the quality and the systems that you want, and then we're able to hold the contractor to it.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything else major that could, dramatically change this number.
Well, it seems like the biggest number that's immediately on the horizon that's known and not known, Steve, is all the retro work and additional work to truly create the early childhood center.
Correct.
I mean, that's a big number at $2 million to sort of plumb and create that space in that. And
that's just not in this project at this point in time. I mean, it's anticipated, because we always think about, okay, how would, like, as Kim was describing, like, how would we function today, and then how is that going to function in the future? We had Linda's office all over the place in the south section, and then the more we really thought about it, we said, she would likely, we wouldn't want her on the upper level of South. We would really want her on the lower level right at the front door, where basically that kindergarten classroom is. So if that's the case, then we're like, well, it doesn't make sense for us to do anything to move her over now. Be better to wait. I mean, obviously she'll be spending plenty of time supporting those programs there, but it made sense to wait. And then, as we mentioned, we had the workroom was, we looked at it in the basement. We had it on different spots around the plan, but we really thought, it's better to build one workroom, not 2, because we can't really have like an administrative workroom and then have one for the school portion. It would be better just to share that equipment and.
But the larger problem for I think for me anyway is, it's a really round number with a really lot of fluff, it feels like, on either side. And so that's the one big number that we know is out there that we really don't have a good handle on.
Right.
Well, we also have line items on the facilities, the board facilities committee, the general maintenance items that Mike's been working on constantly. And, there's anything from, 10 grand to, several $100,000 per line item in there, and some of which have been deemed fairly urgent. So that's why I'm trying to get a sense of this number that's here, $3,264,000 and some change. We have another couple $100,000 in our high priority Mike, I call it the Mike list.
Like an example, that's not carried in here, but we have been working on those items. An example would be the hot water heating boilers at the high school.
Right.
We've been there with our engineers, we've assessed what's there, and the good news is what they're proposing, which is really, I think, a very creative solution. What was budgeted was basically a wholesale replacement, like, was there a total of 4? There's 2 boilers down, on the lower level and 2 up behind the stage. Initially, Mike and our thought was that we'd be replacing, all of those. But in looking at it together with our engineer, their recommendation is to replace one of each pair with a series of modular boilers that would have the capacity, and then keep this existing boiler as a backup, because it's more than capable of providing that function. And then you could always replace it in the future, but it just didn't, in their mind, it didn't make sense, because if you took them both out, you'd be buying excess new capacity when, as a backup boiler, it's more than adequate to provide the services. So that was kind of nice, too, because it had a positive effect on what Mike had estimated for that work. Our engineer felt like we were more than adequate with that, the cost for that project. So those are going to be, those are not on this cost estimate, those are going to be as alternate bids to this bid package to get advantages of kind of scale.
That line item's a good example, because on the original estimate, it was $425,000. I mean, that's a measurable number. It's not a small number. It's not 2 million, but it's still a good chunk of change, so.
But see, it really makes sense to basically piggyback on a project like this, because you'll basically have all 30 trades at the school, and versus mobilizing an electrician, a mechanical guy, you already have mechanical contractors working, so now you're not paying that overhead to do a boiler replacement, but a standalone project. And so we were doing them as add alternates, and then we'll be able to see exactly where those come in, and then you can decide which to accept or not as you go forward.
So do we have a sense of when those numbers will be solidified a little bit more? Because, I mean, when Gary and I have the, sort of here's what we think.
When the bids come back, is really when we'll know. The other thing that we've done is I've contacted CDAC, and don't ask me what the acronym stands for, but they've come out. I've asked for energy audits on them to come through on all of our buildings. They did too. Mike did that a couple weeks ago for the high school and South. And so they try and help school districts and entities look for ways, energy efficiency measures, maybe some different grants. We did get that $10,000 grant kind of with their help for the windows at the junior high. So they're doing the study for that. There's also a construction grant that's out there that Mike and I are going to be applying for, that hopefully we might get some money, up to $50,000 to apply toward the boilers. So we're continuing to look for other ways to help fund these and trying to seek other sources of funding for some of these projects.
Are you done? I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're talking here, let's say 3.2, okay, for this, what's in front of us. We still haven't talked about this 1.2 million that the state has awarded to us to use that we have to match.
Right.
So when we've talked about our bonding capacity goes up to 5 million, but because that's our next conversation. So if we went up to 5 million and we have the 1.2, so that puts us to $6.2 million to use for capital projects. Am I correct? If we went for the full 5, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so when we're looking at these numbers and then the numbers when...
And the 1.2 though is for certain pieces. It can't be used for everything.
Right, but it can be used for the intentions that they were used, what they were allocated for. So that is still part of the mix.
Is that whole 1.2 available, Kim, or some of that has to be held off?
No, I believe it. The whole
all of it's
available.
All of it's available.
Yeah.
And we're by the end of next year's when we have to use that piece?
Wasn't it?
We have to, my recollection is we had to identify a project list by this summer.
By this summer.
Okay.
And we had to utilize it within some period of years thereafter, whether it was 3 or 5. But
I remember
Kim,
that too.
I mean, the thing, that it's an open question. It's a very good question, which is, it only covered certain buildings, and it may have only covered certain aspects of certain buildings. We need to, one of the other things we need to put our
Is to identify
things around
those.
is
Yep.
how much of that we're going to be able to use, and when, and how that funding sort of kicks in, because it matters to the timing of how the dollars come in.
Marie, can I ask a question along those same lines? I didn't know if you were done, but it's the same question.
I was almost done, but yeah, go ahead.
The early childhood grant that we applied for that we haven't heard yet, we have to match some portion of that?
10%.
Yeah.
Which is what? How much?
10%.
Right, so
That's if we get it,
10%
though.
of,
1.2 million, right?
No, it's 10% of two, whatever. This is two different
what did we
grants.
apply for?
So this is the early childhood.
Or what do we, I mean, 10%. 10% of what? 10% of a...
What we applied for what, 2 million?
Is it like
2 million?
No,
I'm
we
just
didn't
going
apply
off
for
of memory,
2
but I thought it
million.
was in excess of
I
2.
don't-
Yeah, it was like, I remember seeing
didn't.
2.5.
Right.
So that said, you know, if we get it, it's a huge boon, you know, obviously. But I think, you know, counting on a huge boon is you know, something that is dangerous at best. So, yeah, I think we, obviously, we're still actively pursuing it, but I think we have to assume that it's not available, that we have to plan as if it's not there.
I have a question with regard to the EC aspect. Twice now, $2 million has been mentioned, and we weren't at $2 million in September for that portion of the, you know, that number for the EC program. And given that some of those components, like the workroom, a handful of components are rolled into, one way or another,
Right,
rolled
into
into
the
the administrative one. And I'm not asking you for a hard number, but what are the odds that we're going to go up to 2 million when we weren't at 2 million in September? And I know that was a rough number in September.
Right. I mean, I would be just guessing. I really would need to study to see what we had in that number, what we have now in the administration that we could take out of that number. And also I know more about what the anticipated scope is from the early childhood, you know, experts in your district, which, you know, may or may not have been in that number. You know, because we really looked at, that was really a broad brush number without the benefit of design.
Sure.
So I can't say. I would just be guessing, and
Okay.
I would lead you astray, I'm sure.
Yeah, because before it was, you know, it was between 842 and 16. So-
I wouldn't assume less,
And 2 million,
yeah, than what was originally estimated.
which is 1.2 or 888?
In September, it was between, the low was 842, the high was 1683.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume less than that,
Right.
but I wouldn't
Right, I-
assume 2 either.
Right.
I just wouldn't.
Maureen, did you get a chance to finish?
So,
And actually, we'll know a lot better after this project.
Sure.
Because we're going to break this bid out. We need to track it by building, but it'll be interesting to see, you know, truly where, instead of the numbers across the entire project, but where is the south renovation coming in? What are we seeing for the electrical, and then, so that we can then extrapolate that for the future work in that building? Because it will reflect what the contractors see as the difficulty of working there.
So if I could, can I just ask
Yeah,
my follow-up, and then,
I'm
okay,
waiting.
then Diane. So the one thing I did say, and again, I guess I apologize to go back to this, but now that we've gone through all of these, I want to go back to something that Gary asked, because it makes a good point. When you look at the renovations that are going on at, like, the 2 elementary schools, so we're taking the kindergarten room at Miller and replacing that and making it a bigger room. And then now you've got the breakout service rooms where those were. And going back to what Gary said, one of the driving concerns of all of this at the elementary schools was giving Manning more space. So
Right.
let's talk about maybe those partition walls at Miller. Could that be taken and put into those EC and First Start rooms at Manning so that Manning can have some of those breakout?
I think you're referring only to early childhood, because First Start is
I'm
shared with
sorry, you're right, I'm sorry, just the one room, because the first, can that be then now utilized to, you know, ease up some of that hallway crowd on the first floor? So when, you know, and again, I don't mean to ask just you, but in terms of getting
Kind of
that-
subdividing some spaces to create more spaces.
Right, because we're taking that space, and now that's being opened.
I mean, it would be something, my first question would be, okay, what are the uses there, and would we be better to build a steel stud, you know, acoustic partition versus trying to move something, you know, from one building to another, which is not going to be the right, I mean,
I'm just
to find the
trying to-
least expensive solution to that.
Yeah, I think we'd want to go back to the building and ask them.
Right.
Is there enough breakout spaces, or is there a need for more?
I guess that's where I'm going to. So I'm not really asking that question to you. I'm just kind of looking at if there's these movable walls, if it's possible. I don't know. I'm just trying to keep costs.
I think it was interesting when we were looking at, say, the new project areas at Manning, you know, Kristen's views of things. I mean, she knows that that's going to really be a big domino falling at Manning. And, as we were meeting and talking about the designs, I mean, she was kind of talking out loud about what it may or may not allow to happen in those older sections as she starts moving people around.
Right.
And it's, but it gives you at least the ability to move somebody around.
That's, I guess, where I'm going with it, because now that we've seen it all, the plans look really nice, because you've taken where the kindergarten was at Miller, and it's now being used for student services. So I guess I'm just kind of asking that question out loud, because that is what has been driving a lot of the discussion as to equitable space and educational
Marie?
space.
I just wanted to add one thought to what you're saying here, and that is I certainly want to make sure that in this renovation that we are creating that breakout space at Manning. We should not be providing services in the hallway. I think there's a great issue of student privacy.
Right.
Parents come into the building, they see the same student in the hallway all the time. They make assumptions about a child's abilities. And, I'm sorry, it's really, really a poor setup.
Right.
And so that is something we want to definitely make sure that we take care of.
Yeah. So when we're talking about this money issue, I just kind of wanted to go back to that, because that made sense, especially after we looked at what the domino at the other elementary school, and so that falls into place.
And we could look at those spaces and see what opportunities are there, and whether it makes sense to roll it into this project, and make it an alternate bid, or what, just to do it now and see what those spaces are. We've really been focusing on these main project areas, because that was the main charge of our assignment.
What I'm saying is that I think Joel's point is well taken, is that part of what is driving all of this is to deal with the overcrowding. And if you do have education going on in the hallways, and we now have an open classroom right near there to utilize that. That's all I'm kind of getting at. I'm sure that is certainly going to be something Kristen will.
I mean, that's really a hidden deficiency at Manning. It goes on every day, but it's not like you're like, oh, we don't have a gym, we don't have this and that. There's a lot of activities taking place in a corridor that's not really appropriate.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to say that. So.
I had some more general questions. Sure. I'm not sure which end of this is going to end up, but I think this one is you specifically. How complete are the drawings, like the bid drawings, the permit, the construction drawings?
We have about 1 foot in CDs and 1 still finishing up some of these design concepts with the team. So our intention is to go out to bid in early April.
So
we're hoping to hit the end of this month, but it's just not possible.
60?
No, we're about 50% through the CDs.
Okay.
We've been where things have stopped moving, like say the high school. We've been focusing on the construction documents and getting those going. I try not. You don't want to cut off the design process and force someone to say, well, I'm sorry, we're done, we're out of time. So there's other areas that are still being, massaged and developed. Predominantly, I'd say Manning is pretty set. Miller, we're still looking at trying to create a larger library space, and how can we do that together with the computer lab. The work area there is pretty good. South, I think, is really kind of firmed up. So. But South, we've been going back and forth trying to balance, what we're proposing cost, and I think we're pretty set on South. So, but there still were some things that were still being designed, and that allowed us, we couldn't really go forward with construction documents and let the engineers wild until we figured that out.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this. I think this is Kim. Our contractors are being pre-qualified?
Pardon me?
The contractors, are they being pre-qualified?
Yeah, we're doing, last year, it's been a really interesting time in public bidding. There are a lot of people that are trying to bid school projects that simply are not qualified. And it's really difficult to DQ them after you open a bid. What we're going to do, one of the contractors has done a couple projects for you. They were involved with a disastrous renovation years ago down at Sandburg High School. Had a really bad contractor, things didn't get done on time. So their architect and their business managers and attorneys developed a pre-qualification section of their bid specs that basically, if we're opening bids on, say, the 21st, on the 14th, they have to submit an entire pre-qualification statement. It tends to be pretty onerous, a lot of paperwork, financial statements, things that what I'd call like the bottom feeders do not want to do. Or they just decide it's not worth the fight, it's going to be very difficult. This is a nice size project. It's an attractive project, but it's if there's ever been a time to do it, now's the time. We literally, this has never happened in 20-something years. We had a mandatory pre-bid meeting for a large school district. A few days before the bid opening, a contractor calls my partner and says, have you issued any addenda? I said, well, we have, but, I mean, you weren't at the pre-bid. Oh, yeah, I was there. He goes, really? Well, I forgot to sign in. I said, well, so then, it was a dilemma for that school district, what did they do with this guy? So they said, well, let's talk to him and see if they can recall anything about the pre-bid. This person was never at the pre-bid. I mean, couldn't recall my partner, where they met, what they talked about, and ultimately they did not accept their bid. But that shows how desperate times are. That somebody, and it's someone we know. I mean, they've built a project for us at New Trier, they built a project for us at Barrington, and they just were in a situation where they obviously missed the pre-bid, but really wanted part of that project. And it was a $1 million project, and they were willing to basically kind of wing it.
So we're going to attempt to try to have pre-qualified as much.
Oh, we are. We're not going to attempt. We're going to do it,
okay.
and it will definitely help. There's two ways you can do it. One is an entirely separate process where you do a notice in the paper and you literally pre-qualify and in a way interview and then narrow the field. That's tricky because it takes a lot of time. It's more expensive as an additional thing you have to do. This will be a part of the process, but it will be a submission before the bid with these documents, and then it will give us more information. What I've heard from people that have dealt with it is that it really does, in a way, get rid of some of the less qualified contractors because they just decide to go bid another project. They do not want to reveal all their financial information, do all the submittals. They don't have the bonding capability. That's become a really big issue, is bonding capability. They are required to have a letter from their surety that they can be bonded and what amounts. And it really tells a lot. We've unfortunately had some jobs this year where good contractors just could not get bonded on fairly small amounts, a $2 million project. But if you have someone if you're doing a project and you have a subcontractor go belly up on you, and it's happening, it seems like on a weekly basis now, that can really hurt you financially if somehow, you've paid ahead and it starts to go into your balance sheet, and that's what's happened. And insurance ratings, it's happening even a lot in the city for just tenant build-out where they're really putting contractors through it because everyone's worried about having somebody go bankrupt during their job. Bonding it's like life insurance. I mean, I have yet to see a bonding company pay out on a project that we've been involved in, but the fear of the bonding company gets people to complete your projects. And but it's an interesting document, and Kim and I will be working in detail looking at this thing to see, does this make sense? We've been bouncing it off of contractors like Executive Construction that worked on this. We've shown it to them to see what they thought about it, and they've given us suggestions on how to make it a little tougher and more reflective, that it will show the good quality contractors.
Are there alternate deducts included in the documents for your drawings?
Yes, we always do alternate bids, either add alternates or deductive alternates. We talked about the items that were on the other list. Those will all be add alternates. We've, an example, the student entrances and staff entrances to the high school, those door sections are going to be replaced, and those are going to be add alternates. And then, depending on what the item is, we decide whether to have it as an add or deductive alternate.
Are voluntary alternates being requested from the bidders as well?
We always do.
Okay.
Ironically, don't get too many. Sometimes it'll be a minor thing, but they don't offer up that many. We always have it in the bid form. People just do not respond to that.
Who's representing or acting as 201's representative? Do we know?
Representative for what?
For the construction.
I mean, basically, our firm together with Mike and Kim have handled all the projects.
And what happens if our bid is over budget?
We would
go over the $5 million.
We would reduce the scope to get it to budget.
Diane,
Did you say-
the bids will come back for the board to approve.
Oh, correct, yes.
Board still has to approve contracts and bids.
If those
They're
bids
done.
come in over $5 million, then we've probably missed something.
Something huge,
And
yeah.
need to reevaluate where we're at.
Right.
Okay.
Didn't you say your plus minus was around 1% right now? Now that you've done so much more work
On the
at each of them?
bids?
The design.
On your,
Oh, no, yeah, we have a design contingency, but that's just a contingency amount. Bids, we're seeing huge ranges, 20 to 40% from low to high on bids. And it really just depends. The good news is, I mean, there's the good contractors. Subs are really struggling because it's been a long time, just not enough work out there. MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, those guys are doing okay. Casework contractors, masons, those people are going out of business. It's really sad. I mean, it's happening this year more than even last year. This is the worst we've seen so far. But people are really aggressive. We opened up roughly a $2.5 million project for St. Viator earlier this year and came in significantly under budget. My partner just opened some projects that were actually bid by Barrington a year ago. And it was a smaller project. It was renovating a couple student restrooms. And they came in at, say, $350 last year. This year, under $3. And basically like $2.25. And when they first opened the number, they're like, geez, how can it be? I mean, it was literally bid a year ago. But he had two numbers that were down there, and they're just, people are really sharpening their pencil. We actually, then that was a debate even in this estimate. You can see we have 7% for general conditions in here. We carried previously 5%. There were discussions about should it really be 9%, and we looked back at current bidding, and we've seen that being more in the 7% range, so that's what we're carrying in these estimates.
Steve, when do you think you'll have the bid for us?
We're going out to bid in early April, and I don't know when your April board meeting is. The hope would be we'd have it for April.
Okay.
Do you have just one board meeting in April, or do you have more than one?
I think we have 3.
3.
Or 5.
Not 5.
You mean they're not every Tuesday in April?
You must meet a lot.
We're not here now.
I'm going to just say something.
The 10th and
The 10th and the 24th.
Yeah, so we do have 2. So the 10th and the 24th. So
It would be the second one.
second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're working feverishly to get these things on the street, and this was important. I mean, I was hoping, depending on what you decide you'd want to do with the information tonight, is that it's, full speed ahead and that we go out and complete the bid documents so that we can get this on the street as quickly as possible.
Mike,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'd love to have Mike, and I need to encourage Mike, Kim, and Kevin to talk about the notion of bringing in an owner's rep construction manager, because this is a $3 million project, and that oversight, I mean, Mike, I love you to death, but I'd love a third party to be responsible for that function.
Maria,
Are there any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Two questions. First one, a little bit of a facetious question, but are you sharpening your pencil also with what you're charging us to do all of this?
Yes, basically, for every dollar that goes down, our fee goes down.
Okay.
This has been not a great time for architectural fees.
Okay.
But, we look at it in the long term that, competitive numbers, our fee reflects those numbers, but that if that means, our clients have funds to do additional projects, that in the long run, that, it will benefit us.
Okay. It just sounds like the guy at the bottom is getting squeezed really hard, and I'm just wondering how equitable that is as you go up the chain from MEPs all the way up to the person running it.
Everybody's getting squeezed. I mean,
I have one other question. Do we have any requirements for women-owned business or minority-owned business related to our bids? Is there any benefit? And
we
do
have
not.
to track that. So we'll find out from anybody who bids whether they're female-owned, minority. There's a set of criteria that, and we have to report that to the state each year. So we keep track of that.
it's not a bid requirement, but we do encourage, there's a good female-owned firm that we do, that's done a number of projects for us, a lot of projects, and we always invite them. They have not won a job here, but they have bid on jobs here. And we go to people that we know have performed well for schools and then reach out. We just actually found a contractor in the Itasca area that does a lot of good public work and is a really impressive contractor, and we're making sure they're aware of this project and bid it, so we're trying to drum up as much interest from good contractors as possible.
I have 3 more.
You have another question, Dave?
Who from 201 is approving the payment applications?
Diane, I'm having a very
Who is
difficult time
approving the
hearing.
payment applications from 201? So when the bills come in, who reviews them to make sure that that's actually done?
Well, Steve
We do. It's part of our
that.
contract is basically review. They initially, basically at the end of the month, they give us what's called a pencil copy, which is a draft of their pay application. We make sure that all the trades, percentages of completion, and items that they're requesting are in fact complete and that are acceptable. And then we also make sure that they do what are called trailing waivers, where the general contractor or construction manager, they have a waiver of lien for the entire pay application amount and whatever they've billed so far. And then the subcontractors are 1 month behind. So if the plumber was paid $100,000 in the previous application, when the next one comes, we need that waiver from them before that's processed. They also need to submit electronically certified payrolls to make sure that they are, a larger job tends to be more union, but that they are complying with Illinois labor law as far as prevailing wages. So we get that, and we will not approve their pay app until that's in hand. Then we put that together, certify it, and send it to Kim, and then she processes the payment.
And I make sure all that documentation is there, everything's been signed, we've got the certified payrolls, all those things. Also set up a spreadsheet where I track, here's what the costs are, and then keep track as we go of things, what things are. Dan mentioned something about a construction manager. If you had a construction manager, that would be the function that they would perform if you went that route. Now, while we're talking about that, though, I typically haven't seen a construction manager on a project of this size, but I have worked with construction managers, but on us, like 12 or 15 times the size of project.
Right.
But the question is, then we have to go out and we need to interview construction managers and things like that. Do you have an estimate of what the fee would be, and is it typical on the dollar amount isn't high. There's a lot of, we're impacting a lot of buildings. There's a lot of moving parts to this and a lot to keep track of, but is that typical, and what do you think the estimate the fee might be?
I personally, I know this is big for you. I would not see this as a project where a construction manager would make a lot of sense. If it was a multi-year, $30 million project, then you would already have them on board working together with us to work that project. We really see...
We are going to be multi-year already by definition. So...
Yeah, but...
Not on this project. This is really not even a full year of construction.
Well, the first 3 point whatever, but
Right.
we've got a big follow-on immediately after it that's in one spot. I don't know.
And construction managers...
I've seen them down to sort of $1 million and 500,000, and it just depends on, admittedly, this point in the process is difficult.
Right.
Admittedly. But to the extent that we can find one that is an effective oversight vehicle, and in particular, because, again, you guys are eminently capable, but having a third party who does that on an everyday basis, performing that function, I just, I'll ask you to consider it, very strongly. And if the answer, I'll leave it with you, but I'll ask you to consider it very, very strongly.
Does the project manager have a role in any of that? Is the project manager a completely separate, you mentioned ECI.
Right.
Would they, in some capacity, let's just use them for example, throw us a project manager totally unrelated to all the other contractors and subcontractors, right? So would they have an independent role in approving some of these bills or reviewing the bills? And obviously, they keep them on task, and they keep them on time, and they keep them on budget. And is that the role of a project manager? Or, it sounds as though it's almost a melded position.
Typically, a project manager would be hiring a construction manager. A project manager is someone who would work directly, usually for the owner, and represent the owners. A lot of large facilities have their own project managers. ECI, they do a lot of construction management work. They're very good at what they do. Where they do that is usually a long-term project, or it's a negotiated contract. It's not bid.
Sure.
I like ECI. They're a very good contractor. The best competition and the best value for you is bidding it with general contractors, because it's almost an exponential multiplication of the number of trades that are looking at something. A construction manager, and it varies. Different districts do it. We worked at Barrington on a $70-something million project, multi-year, and they had Gilbane Construction was their their construction manager. After a while, they got into the project and they parted ways because they just didn't feel like they were not on a hook. They had no risk.
Right.
So if you had a change order and it went up, they got a piece of that change order. You can do construction management as an advisor or construction management at risk. The best scenario in my mind when you do it is would be a guaranteed max construction manager, but then you would do an entirely different RFP process, and you would select a construction manager, and then you would work with them to come up with the number for this project versus, and that's one guy going to, say they have 5 plumbers. If you put this out to bid and you have 5 GCs bidding it, you could have 25 plumbers looking at that trade. And for a project this size that's not even a full year in duration, I just think you would be adding more costs for someone who's not building anything to the project. The pay-apps and everything, I mean, this is not an extraordinarily large project. I mean, it's going to be done basically by Thanksgiving. Most of the projects can be done this summer. I mean, I understand, it's good to have some involved, but you're just going to be paying them every day to basically be another person in the team.
Well, I mean,
it certainly would help, but
in fairness, I mean, we have attorneys who review documents for a reason. We have accountants who review financial work for a reason. We have any myriad of educational consultants who come in and look at what our educators do for a reason. We have any number of professionals who act as consultants. Again, I'm not one to, demand in this case. I will just ask that you visit it, consider it as strongly as you can, and then, let us know at the board level if you think it's the right thing to do, and if it's not, then that's, let us know that.
I guess I would just say that this just seems like something before we ask them to do that we should agree on that this is what we want them to investigate.
Well, I'm asking them to think about it. That's all I'm asking.
Well, you're asking them to do work and come back with numbers and decide if it's cost effective to do it.
I'm not asking them to come back with numbers. I'm asking them to consider that role.
I just think that's a board decision to make, not an individual board member decision.
I actually did write a note during that conversation because I think this is one of those things that's a process thing, because what we're looking at tonight, that is adding on and adding into a piece that we really haven't talked about now. So I guess I will have to say that I think that should be a question that we should ask the board if we want to go down that path of doing that, because that is something that we do, because it would be something that adds to the cost, adds to the time. So, I guess from where I sit and the process, I think that question should be asked to the board if we have unanimous or about that position. So I'm kind of.
Well, I mean, it could be asked about any changes to the scope of this project at this point.
Right, sure.
Any and every.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That's what I'm saying at is as we're having these discussions about where we're going with this, I think that is part of that process that we when we're giving direction, we have to make sure that it is a board direction, and
right.
And especially when it's part of our board agreement that when we're asking the district staff to spend any time on something, and I guess in this case the architect that we do speak with one voice. And so I guess the question is, I'm going to say that I think that's going to be part of what we're going to have to ask.
Is this, do we need to determine if we want to hire a construction manager before this process even begins, before the bids are even stuck in envelopes?
you couldn't bid this without determining that question.
Right.
Because who are you bidding it to?
Okay.
I mean, right now, I mean, what you've always done, as far as my knowledge of this district, unless you went back to building the high school and the junior high, is you bid to general contractors or to specific trades if it's a window replacement or something like that. If you were truly going to do a construction management approach, you would want to put an RFP on the street for construction managers, go through, you'll get God knows how many responses, shortlist that group, then select someone, and you determine at that point, are you talking about a construction manager as advisor where they have no financial risk in your construction and they're just managing the construction, or a general contractor at risk, or construction manager at risk, which is a totally separate contract form, and then they would have they develop a guaranteed max and everything. and then you would have them on board, you would likely want to have them on board then for multiple years.
Yeah, did I say general contractor? I didn't mean general
Right, no,
contractor. I meant
right.
construction manager.
Correct.
So let's ask, so, this is a valid question, so I guess, especially since it is part of the timeline that we're talking about to get these things finished, do we want to give direction to the district to go forward with a contract manager?
All I want to know is if they've had a discussion about it and if we've ruled it out and why, or if it's never been discussed and they have a 20-minute conversation about the pros and the cons and come back and tell us, I mean, I think what I'm hearing over here is, the project's not big enough and it probably doesn't warrant it, but I mean, I think that's all, Marie, just.
Experience as well.
And that's, I guess.
Right. That's all I think.
On a $75 million project, or maybe on a $20 million, again, depending upon, is it gonna go more than just the summer and things like that?
While you're moving and living out of a box and.
Right.
In a temporary desk.
And, yeah, and there are a lot of things going on and things like that, and, everyone should be cognizant of all the additional time that Mike's gonna put in, extra time, and everyone's gonna put in. But I'm not, and Mike, I don't know what your thought is on the construction manager piece.
A lot depends on the GC that's awarded the bid too on there. That makes a world of difference.
Right.
As far as where I stand on it. Working with the GC's superintendent on the job on our outstanding ones, or there's some that have no idea what they're doing on there, so it could go either way. But for me, a lot of it depends on who's awarded that bid on there. That's the most critical part of it all.
And I think that does, and based on some experience we had last summer, we definitely know what we're looking for and what qualities, so that will be an important piece of that whole process after the bids come in.
Right, absolutely.
I still have two.
Can I just wrap this up? So the question then, Shannon said, so do you need any time to be able to tell us this, or have you just told us this? I guess, I'm just trying to figure out.
I think they just told us.
I think they just told us. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So does anybody want to not, or does anybody not? Do we, because one of the things we're here for tonight is to move this, to get you to the point where you can do the bids and do your point piece, so you can get this back to us, so you can get these done on time.
Right.
So are we?
I don't know if we're taking an official vote or something, but I would say no to the project manager. I think Kim and Mike and Steve are more than ready to tackle the job, so I would say no.
Anybody?
I concur. I've done it myself, so I know it's doable.
Oh, well, then.
I just want to hear Kim and Kevin say they've talked about it and that they want to go one way or the other. Okay. That's all.
No.
I had the same conversation. I like what you guys have said. I support that.
Okay, I guess I would have to say that too then. So.
Can I just ask one more question before we move forward? And
I have a question too, so that'll.
I just wanted to wrap up that one thing. So go, whoever.
I still have two, and then I'm.
Go ahead.
Diane said first. So Diane, go ahead.
What is the final completion date? Do we have one?
Yes, it's for all other than south, it's August 13th, and then we have not set the completion date yet for the south.
And then, I know this is kind of a far out one, but what happens if the contractor doesn't finish on time? Is there some sort of liquidation dollar amount to sign?
They would lose $5,000 a day if they do not meet the substantial completion date, and then $500 a day if a month later they have not completed their punch list work.
What's our substantial completion date?
August 13th.
So substantial and final are the same?
They're not the same. Substantial completion, defined by AI, the general conditions of construction, is that it's completed to the point where the owner can occupy and use the space. So as you would have like on a project in your house or whatever, there might be some nicks of paint, you have some punch list items, but that all the safety systems are functioning, all the doors lock, everything is functioning, running water, all those things are in place. And then basically, at that point, when they request inspection for substantial completion, we review and determine if they have met that date, And then we basically prepare a punch list of any items that are either done incorrectly or that, there's damage which happens. And then they have roughly a month to complete that work. And then there's final completion, liquidated damages.
Okay, that was it.
Go ahead.
All right. My question takes us past, we've now finished all these wonderful projects for the summer and the administrative offices and all of that, and the planning process for the Early Childhood Center itself. Do we anticipate the timeline for that to be done sooner than this? Because I'm imagining that we're going to have to know if we are able to offer additional programming or fee-based programming or something next year. We're going to kind of need to know in January when parents are looking for these types of services so we can tell them what we're going to be offering and show them what the facilities are going to look like. So what kind of timeline are we talking about there?
You would want to start late this spring or summer on that work. There's a lot to determine because it's not something like you're not just moving a first grade classroom or something. I mean, this is a whole new function. It could be as simple or as complicated or as robust as you decide you want to deliver, but it's really an educational question, and we've talked about it already, that this is really something I could see if you're truly going to go forward, that this summer that we're working on this, we're looking at facilities together, determining what the program's going to be. I mean, what are the needs and wants that you want to deliver? What is this program going to have? In a conceptual way, so that before you start designing anything, that you have a written program. And that really should happen. I mean, unfortunately, affecting some summer vacations, but it would have to happen this summer because it's going to take more time than, creating a computer lab or, administrative space. It's going to be more complex. Because when we met, I mean, it was really exciting, but also daunting that, you have an elementary school that now you're going to try to make an early childhood center. It has some great characteristics, but then it's missing a lot of things that they really need to deliver the right type of program and to be up to current standards. And what are those so that we can determine that, and then we'd start to do design. And I think ideally that you would be going out to bid before the end of this year. That would really be ideal.
Calendar year?
Yes.
Calendar year. Usually Christmas is a tricky time. You either got to hit and go on the street right before Christmas break, and then have enough time so you'd open bids, around Martin Luther King Day, or you wait and you go out at the start of January, like maybe the second week of January, and then you open them at the end of the month. But that would be really the target.
Okay.
Because I think you're right. You're going to need to be able to describe this and sell this and show the community what it is you're doing. And it's going to be new.
We've talked about, Steve and I have talked about that, what that timeline looks like. So
Sure.
We're working on that. And while we're talking about the Early Childhood Center, I do have a copy of the grant that we submitted. So it was $1.584 million is what we requested, and that's an all or none. So.
Oh, so we either get it all
Or we get nothing, right?
There's no
Yeah,
partial funding.
There's no partial funding on that.
So were you done?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. My question, and it's not so much a question, but it's a concern with regard to the grant, the 1.2 million, just to make sure that we know you have this, right? So we know what the requirements are when we go out to bid? Because if we do have to have X number of, minority or women and minority business owners in order to get these funds, then we have to meet those requirements as well, right?
Just to clarify, you're not talking that grant.
No, I'm talking the current grant that we have now, the 1.2
Right, we have all
million
the-
exists, yeah.
The money that okay, sorry.
Just so that we meet those requirements is all.
Yeah, I'm not aware that there are any different requirements on bidding that.
Great.
That it's basically your standard bid requirements. I mean, you have a lot, your general conditions are 80, 90 pages long of a lot of legalese and insurance and, things in there, and that's from your attorneys and from your insurance providers, and that's all in the bid documents. But beyond that, I'm not aware of that there'd be any specific thing that would be different about it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Just really quick before we move off this topic, just a couple things. One is, again, that a little bit later on the agenda, the approval is for Steve to go out, complete the bid documents, go out to bid. But again, that information has to come back to the board for approval. So the approval of the contracts, that has to still come back to the board. And the other piece is the documents that Steve provided tonight. We will post those online to our website. And in addition, I talked to Steve briefly this evening that we'll, set up a meeting prior to the bid opening, bid documents, in order to, share information with the community and also answer questions of the community, because obviously they don't have that opportunity really at a board meeting. So we will be setting that date and, again, share the information and have a question and answer, opportunity for questions and answers.
That would be good, because I know even the people that are sitting here probably can't see this, and I don't think the people at home are seeing it either, so that would be real helpful. Okay, so then the chair will entertain a motion to direct architect Steve Cashman to prepare a bid.
Actually, isn't there a discussion item first before we go to the
Well,
action
do
items?
we want to do that?
Well, they're pretty interrelated. From my vantage point, they're on the agenda as discussion.
Do you want to?
and action.
It's up to the board.
I didn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
We could do the discussion action items. I was just moving things.
Again, from my vantage point, I think the organization of the agenda was, to me, it made all the sense in the world to have the funding conversation after the construction conversation, because they dovetail very.
I'm
Fine with that?
I'm fine. All right, then we'll hold off on the motion, and we will move to the next discussion item regarding non-referendum bond amounts.
All right, in terms of the financing piece, I sent all of you the draft of the information from Liz Hennessy with the different scenarios. So we talked about doing one issuance of the bonds, $5 million, and in June of 2012. We also asked her to tell us what it would look like if we issued $4 million in June of 2012 and $1 million in June of 2013, and also splitting it up $3 million in June of 2012 and $2 million in June of 2013. She provided the district with issuance cost based on the different scenarios. And there are certain fixed costs in there and certain things that vary based on par amount. So estimated bond counsel and disclosure counsel have both a fixed component and a component based on par amount. You've got rating agency costs. Again, we get that cost directly from the rating agency. There's cost for printing the official statements and posting those notices. And again, each portion you issue, you incur that cost. So on some of those, if you're doing just $5 million, you have that cost one time. If you're breaking it up into different par amounts, you incur that cost twice. Verification fees, you've got publication fees and the surety bond listed, and also the underwriter's discount is included in the cost estimates. And again, that's based on par amount, so that no matter what you do, as long as your total issuance is that number is the same. So whether we issue $5 million at once or we do 4 in 1, that cost is the same. So those costs were provided to you on page 3 of the document. And then the different scenarios were run with, and the $5 million issued all at once required some refunded debt service just to be able to meet our DSUB capacity. If you issue 4 in 1 and the 3 in 2, we didn't have to refund. We had capitalized interest there. And some of the questions we had on these issues were why was some of the bond issue, like the 2013 bond issue, being paid off sooner? And that's really a defensive move because of short-term interest rates. Let's see, what else? So then if we go to page 7 of the proposal, The costs are outlined there, and the one place it says total interest costs, it's the total debt service, so principal, interest, all the issuance costs. So you can see option one, the $5 million, issuing it all at once is a little bit more costly than issuing $4 million and $1 million. And so total debt service in issuing $5 million all at once was a little over almost $5.7 million. Issuing 4 and 1 was $5.5 million, and issuing 3 and 2 was 5.6. We also asked her to give us a sensitivity of the issuance. And option 2, interest rates would have to increase by 100 basis points to make us worse off by doing that option. Option 3 was probably the one that was most sensitive to any changes in interest rates. So the 2 options really for the board to consider are probably the $5 million all at once or the 4 and 1. So it's really about, saving about $140,000 in total cost.
Kim, I have a question here when I look at this option 1 and option 2. In option 1, it says the length of maturity goes to 2021, but in option 2, where we do the 4 and 1, it says 2020. Why are we paying option 2 off? I mean, I'm glad we are, but why is option 2 being paid off a whole year earlier than option 1 would be? Why is there a difference there?
Some of it is again because the way you have to structure the issue and the debt service in there, and your D-sub base. And in the one you have a refunding, the other one you don't.
Okay, and if I could ask the second question, does Kevin and Kim, do you guys have a recommendation as to which one we should do?
I could give you 2 reasons. So one rationale, again, probably, looking at and understanding that every dollar that we spend in the district is important. Option 2, because, it saves you some money over time. From looking at time management pieces and, you're doing double work in option 2, but in option 1 would save some additional work, but option 2, it's $140,000 and that's a lot of money.
And that's basically my response. Option 2, you're looking at financial savings, but at the same time, it's more time intensive. So option 1, there's not the financial savings, but there's the less time intensive.
Is there any chance those 2 wash out?
Well, interest rates would have to move significantly, and Dan, you would know too, I don't believe that they're anticipating short-term rates to move up that dramatically in the near term.
The Fed certainly hasn't given any indication that they're looking to do anything anytime soon.
On that, can I just ask a question? Just on that, if we do the 4-1, which sounds like, are we subjected, the 1, is that at whatever the interest rate is next year?
Yes.
Okay. So we're, okay.
Right.
So have you started constructing the sources and uses for the construction project itself? Dollars in, timing of dollars out, amount of dollars out, because the timing, is different. It's obviously concentrated in the months, July through December. We have cash on hand. We have plans for what Shannon referred to as Mike's list, and then we're looking at bond proceeds as well.
Right.
Have we constructed sort of a spreadsheet that gives me a plan for here's how much cash we need over the next 12 months, and here's how much cash we have, and here's how much cash we're going to pull in, and here's when we're going to pull it in?
Well, in terms of the projects, we know that all those projects are going to the high school, Manning and Miller, those costs are going to be done and probably have every final thing by October at the latest, Steve. And then probably by January, February, everything would be
Again,
submitted
Yeah,
for.
Have we laid it out?
I have not laid it out specifically.
Because, I mean, I guess it's missing to me. And, you know, there's a number of, as you know, and they're fairly esoteric in nature. There's some coupon information that's missing for the serial maturities in the bonds, both in option, you know, in all three options, but because you know, pages 5 and 6 have different maturity schedules and different amortization schedules for the 2013 issue. And philosophically, she did something in 2013 that was defensive because it was a small issue versus a 3-2, which, you know, so all very sort of esoteric bond-related stuff that I would have loved to understand how she structured those, because it would have actually been easier to answer Gary's question about why the all-in cost is higher on the 3-2 versus the 4-1, to see the coupons attached to them serial maturities in the early years as opposed to the late years.
And Liz was working on that, and I got it literally right before I came, so I have not had a chance to review that.
And candidly, I mean, whether it's this or whether it's, you know, and Steve, is, you know, the amount of work, you know, that you've done over the months in the last few years with the district, not just understanding the district's facility needs, but understanding its culture and its conversations has been fantastic. But in all candor, just terribly disappointed to have to receive, you know, your stuff last night and then the drawings this evening. I do presentations for multi-million-dollar investment decisions all the time to investment committees. No committee I've ever dealt with has taken a presentation inside 24 hours and made that decision. So, you know, with all due respect, we've got a meeting next week. I don't mind all the work continuing, but I'm in no position tonight to, you know, vote to just, you know, authorize going out to bid or authorize, you know, option 1 or option 2 without some of these other questions being answered.
Is there anyone else that feels that way?
It's a lot of information. I have one question. Kim, you're saying about $140,000 difference. Is that, are you considering the information that she has in here about the cost of issuance?
That's all in there.
It's all in
Yes,
that
that's all in that.
page 8 or
yeah,
whatever it is?
In page 7, yep.
And it gets, you know, there's no, one of the beauties of the PMA presentation is that they provide, you know, just as copies, all of their data backup. So, you know, there's no data backup to this, you know, 7-page or 8-page PDF slash PowerPoint, and that would have been really helpful to understand how that all-in cost got built in, because there's things you can obviously look at and ask about if you know how that data is constructed.
Well, and one of the things that we talked about was that even if there are premium bonds, then that reduces the par amount.
Well,
And so net the proceeds are the same.
well, it doesn't need to reduce the par amount, actually. I mean, you can structure it so that you still issue par, and you just...
And Liz has done both of those analyses, and unfortunately, we got those right before the meeting.
I know,
so.
and I wouldn't have wanted those right before the meeting either. Look, I'm not impugning in any way, shape or form, you know, the work that's been done or the options that are being presented or the choices or the conversations that we're having. In no way. What I'm saying is, you know, there's still some questions. There's still some questions about scope, about what else we add on. You know, and so you're clearly not going to be prepared with bid documents until early April anyway. I'm just not prepared to cast a vote that says, yeah, go.
But, well, with regards to the bid documents, again, the board still, I mean, there's still that other step that comes before the board, and that's the actual awarding of the contracts.
I understand, but at that point, I mean, the scope's been set. You know, the meeting, you know, all the pre-bid meetings have been had. All the work that's been done on the contracting side to sort of build their build their cost estimates and build their bids around, that's all been set. At that point, it's a really binary conversation. Yes or no? And the reality is that the answer is going to be yes. So there's no sort of conversation involved in that, from my vantage point. The only conversation we can have, I'd like more than 24 hours to process this stuff. I think, I've heard at least 3 different comments about other things that we'd like to incorporate into the scope. And we have a meeting next week. I'd like to process this stuff for a week and deal with the vote next week.
I guess my opinion would be that this is, nothing that were brought tonight is really in essence different than what we talked about back in September. There are a few items here and there, but I think I brought up a couple of things that I asked about it that I absolutely feel that when I brought up that I received the answer that I had. And so I think anything that we have here, we have run these numbers a number of different ways now. We already approved going up to 5 million. It's been asked a number of times, how do we do that? So now we have another option here. So we keep talking about the same things again, and I think what we have in front of us tonight is a fine-tuning of what has been going on since September. So I feel that we set up this meeting to come to this meeting, to talk about it, and to move forward. And frankly, I think I'm ready to do that because I didn't see any brand new things. Frankly, some of the numbers came in better than we thought. So from where I sit, I feel happy that some of those numbers came in as less. And since we are going to have the opportunity to look at the bid numbers and finalize that percent there, I didn't see anything tonight in any of this that frankly was, that I personally needed any more time to do because we've had all this stuff since September. So that's what I feel. If anybody else has any.
Go ahead, Joe.
All right, I just kind of get out of this question for a second. On the option 2, where we have 4 million and 1 million, are we locked into getting the 1 million in 2013 in June, or can we get it earlier if we need it?
No, we can get it earlier. We can do it later.
Yeah. What does that do to the projected, I guess, so the cost is difference between just getting the 5 million now and then getting 4 million, then if we get 1 million sooner, does that impact that difference that we would just maybe go for the 5 million now?
Yeah, I didn't run that. I don't know what that impact is going to look like. You can figure out that it's somewhere between that 2.04 and 2.12 interest cost, but I don't know what that looks like because I didn't model that.
I just didn't want to get, if we went with the option 2, I didn't want to get locked in, that we had to do it after a certain date, or we could do it.
Yeah, we have up to 3 years to issue. So if we decided we didn't need it, and then it's really kind of guessing where you think interest rates are going to go. If you thought interest rates were going to go up to, 4%, highly unlikely, but then you would want to, do it sooner than later.
Yeah.
If you saw interest rates really starting to move up, but again, there's no indication that the Fed's going to move short-term rates.
Okay. You can dump more and more information on me about this stuff, but this is not my area of expertise. And, I have the information that I need to make the decision to move forward with our district initiatives. So I'm prepared to go ahead and vote on this tonight.
Kim, I have one question. This additional information, is it going to change the savings between option 1 and option 2? No, right? It's going to stay the same, correct? Okay, well, I agree.
Well,
You could change,
unless...
you could structure option 3 differently.
yeah, there might be, I don't know, I haven't had a chance to look at
$3
it.
million doesn't cover the first round of bids, though.
But you're not
We got cash
recommending
already.
bid 3,
Carrying cash costs money.
I mean, option 3.
No.
Well, I agree with Marie and with Joel, and I believe we've got enough information to move forward with.
It is my area of expertise, and I don't think I do.
I do.
It's two separate things, right? I mean, one is voting on the direction for Mr. Cashman and his team. The other is really the direction for Kim as far as how we fund. They're two separate things.
There's
right?
2 separate motions,
So, Dan, just,
action items.
sure. Dan, just to clarify, are you suggesting both of those wait until next week, or you're?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that on Steve's work, I just haven't had time to process it. So, I mean, that's not a question of, do I feel like I need more? I feel like I need more time. You know, I'm just not accustomed to making a multi-million-dollar decision, you know, and especially when I've seen the drawings effectively starting at 7 o'clock this evening. I just need more time on that. And I certainly don't want to slow Steve down, and we're having a meeting next Tuesday. So all work can go, you know, full steam ahead. That's not the issue for me at all. On this, on the bonds, I have substantive questions, which are, you know, and I'm a bond guy who has done any number of municipal tax-exempt bond offerings as a, you know, commercial finance officer. You know, and there are questions that make no sense to anybody at this table, save for Kim, and that's a conversation that you know, is productive in a certain space, but not necessarily here, save for explaining how things fell out. So, to get to your, you know, it's, for me, it's questions about information on the bonds. It's a question about processing and, you know, review on the construction piece. And again, we meet next Tuesday.
So Maria, I think for me personally, the financing piece of it, doesn't matter whether we make the decision tonight or next week or the week after, because we're not doing this yet. I'm more inclined to let the bond geek over there be happy and get his questions answered, because it doesn't substantively change, you know, other things that we're trying to do. As far as the first item and Mr. Cashman's direction, you know, if we chose to wait till next week, I don't think it'll make much difference, but I'm willing to vote on it tonight. On the financing piece, I would say, you know, if Dan wants a little more time, I certainly wouldn't stand in his way. I don't think it changes anything for what we're doing.
I would just like to make the board aware that I did make an executive decision, and we have placed 2 bid notices in the paper. They'll be in there tomorrow morning for the abatement work and for the windows, because those pieces have got to get out on the street so that we can meet our deadlines. So, you know, we can pull it, but we've gone ahead and done that in the interest of the time constraints that we're under. So I want everyone to be aware of that. If we need to, you know, do something differently with that, we can certainly do that, but we had to make a decision to get things rolling.
Well, let's
We're a
finish
unique animal in that we ask for approval of the right to bid, which a lot of other districts don't.
Let's finish then with the,
Well, I agree, it's been a lot of information. I feel a little overwhelmed with timing, and I know it's kind of out of our control. And with the first one, Mr. Cashman did a great job of answering my questions for me. I felt pretty comfortable with that one. It is a little disconcerting that we have more questions or more things that we seem to want to add to that, but I'm not inclined to have a problem with that one. I guess I demur to Dan a little bit on the bond one. It's not as timely, it seems. I don't personally have any additional questions on that one.
okay, then I guess for me, I guess I will have to say that there is nothing that I saw here tonight presented to us that changed my mind or anything else from what we talked about in September. As a matter of fact, it helped me to make me feel better that some of the plans are continuing along. So I
apologize for the late release of the information. We had 2 separate design meetings last week, and there were changes that were requested, and Manning, Miller, South, even at the high school. And we were trying to update the drawings so that what you saw today was reflecting where things currently sat versus a design that was more than a week old. So we literally were completing the changes that we requested last week today, and I apologize that we didn't get them out.
Yeah, well,
And the issue is, for me, is not your work. It's as always, it's fantastic work. The issue for me is I simply, I've had all of, 18 to 3 hours to sort of process it. And that's an issue for me. It's not, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, again, we're meeting next week, and you still have work to do on the bid documents. And, but, yeah, I mean, I'm a voice, and that's all I am. But, on the bonds, it's an area of expertise. I have significant, not just questions, but concerns about how things get structured and whether or not bond trading desks who trade fixed-rate municipal bonds are going to have follow-on trades that produce, 5 to 10 point profits that we ultimately pay for in an interest rate. So, yeah, I mean, those questions are ones I'd love to just have answered before I vote to go.
If you don't get, so you'll ask these questions at next week's meeting?
Well, I mean, I have placed them with Kim, because Kim needs to talk to Liz about them.
Right, and like
I'd love to have Liz
yeah.
answer them, and she's already sent some things that we haven't had
Right.
the opportunity to see. And so what this really gets to is this notion of, there's a website, and I'll encourage, not at this meeting, but it's called municipalbonds.com, and the first thing that pops up is a thing, they show 3 different bond offerings and what their yield is and what the price the bonds are trading at, because it shows a coupon. Basically, the price is referenced as a number greater than 100, less than 100, at 100. 100 is par. Means if it's $25,000 in bonds at 100, you pay $25,000. But if an investor pays 110, they're paying $27,500 to buy that bond. The question is, who gets the $2,500 that's over par? If you don't do it right, then that's basically a trading desk profit. And that trading desk profit is funded by the interest rate that the borrower of the funds pays. Again, very esoteric stuff. It's very geeky bond stuff. It's questions and concerns I wanted to raise. Because if there's any value I add at this table, this is it.
Okay, then to just finish what I was saying, my point is that I would say that we keep fine tuning, but we basically have the same things in front of us. And I feel that some of this bond, we've been talking about the bond issue and over, and I'm from where I sit, I guess I'd have to share the same thing with Joel, in that I can say that I trust our business manager and Liz to bring to us this information. What I'm concerned about is we've provided more and more issuance of bonds, and my fear is that we just keep, because that'll create another set of questions and another set of questions and another set of questions. So from my seat, I feel that I am ready to move forward in securing the money necessary to do these projects, and I would like to see us move forward with that. There's nothing else that I see, and I don't know that. Then the next set of information would bring then another set of questions. So then we are moving forward with these.
Well, why don't we just move on to the action item to direct the architect, and then we can discuss the second one there.
Then the chair will entertain a motion to direct architect Steve Cashman to prepare bid documents and to issue bid documents for the summer 2012 facility project
So moved.
presented. Sorry.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Abstain?
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion carries. Go through with Then on the issuance of bonds,
Marie, can I just ask one more time before you motion?
Sure.
Do we really have a problem with letting Dan spend a couple of days digging around and making sure that we're getting the very best deal possible? I guess I heard what you said your fear was, but ultimately we're moving forward with the bid and that type of thing, so we know we need the money. I guess I'm just trying to understand why we wouldn't let
I
him
just
do
gave
his
my opinion.
financing thing.
That was my
No,
opinion.
I agree, and to me, this is very, very dance floor and a very specific dance that not all of us could even participate in if we wanted to. And, if Dan can come back with something, and then it'll spark a whole bunch of other questions, and is that the right path? Is that the way that it should be done? Can we go ask Liz? Can we bring her back? Kim, what do you think? We're really, I think, for me, it's overanalysis, and that just leads to paralysis at this board, and I really think we should be moving forward.
So I don't think anyone suggested we not move forward, and I agree with the initial part of your statement, which is most of us don't have the expertise that Dan does. I don't think it's Dan's floor at all. I think we have fiduciary responsibility to manage the money as much as
But Dan can come back and tell.
And I think that if he has some questions and there's some things in the minutia or the details that may help us save money or have a better position, that doesn't, again, I don't see the harm, other than we're trying to ramrod this through. I don't see the harm in giving him a couple of days
I
to,
assure you that by next Tuesday, my questions will be answered one way or the other.
and perhaps it changes.
Because there's basically three.
Which way we go. Maybe really option one may be a better answer based on some of the nuances of how the bonds are issued. We wouldn't know that. Dan and Kim are the only ones with Liz's counsel that can tell us that information. And if these questions haven't been asked, we have not discussed how we're going to issue
But
these.
for me, I rely on, I listen to my fellow board members, but I rely on Kim and Kevin and Liz and the questions that I ask and feedback I give. I'm happy to listen to other board members, but Dan can come back with a very detailed explanation, and I'm not going to feel like I'm going to get much more out of it than I already have. I have enough information to make this decision.
I guess I would have to say two things. I don't think this is ramrodding at all. We have asked this question a number of times, and we have restructured this issue a number of times. And I guess the second thing is, I have legal expertise, and I would never sit at this board table and say that you should all take my legal expertise, because that's not what I'm here for. So I feel that we have been talking about this and talking about it and talking about it, and we've had rebundling and discussion. So from where I sit, I am ready. I do have enough information, and I trust the people that we employ to bring this. So that's my opinion.
So we don't respect
Everybody-
Dan enough to
I've done,
I didn't say that. I didn't
I've
say
done
that.
$2 billion in commercial
say that.
financing transactions in my career.
Didn't
And
say
then, clearly, the board has a very clear opinion about they just need to move forward. And unfortunately, that just means that we're going to have to do follow-on stuff that may or may not be effective. And it goes to questions of what the district pays.
Gary, are you ready to vote?
I'm ready to move forward.
Dan, we know yours. Mary Kay?
Are we voting?
No, we're asking if we're
I'm
ready to
ready.
vote. Diane?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to direct Business Manager Kim Anderson to finalize the non-referendum bond issuance as presented. I'm sorry, let's back up. Diane, which option did you?
I'd prefer to give Dan a little more time. I don't see any purpose.
Oh.
We've been waiting for numbers and numbers and numbers, but that's,
Okay, I'm sorry, you said you were ready to move.
I'm ready to move forward with the vote, with the
With the
roll call.
vote, okay. So are we going to take, do we have?
Just make the
We're going to
motion
make
for
it number
option two. I
option
think
two.
that was.
Okay, we'll do it
I
for
don't
the
think anyone-
option two, and then we'll go from there. The chair will entertain a motion to direct Business Manager Kim Anderson to finalize non-referendum bond issuance as option two as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Charleston?
No.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
No.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes. So the motion carries. Are there any public comments? I'm sorry, do you have anything else? Are there any public comments?
Can I ask a question?
You can come up to the podium.
From the discussion I just heard, Kim already said twice she hasn't even read the papers on the bonds, that she hasn't had time to review them because she just got them. Why in the world would you pass that without having somebody who's got expertise, or all of you, to read through it before you vote on it? It makes absolutely no fiscal responsibility by you guys at all. That's my comment.
Are there any other public comments? Vic?
I agree with the last,
Question?
my name's Mike Graham. I agree with the last public comment.
Bill, you guys are crazy. Yeah, what the heck?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel issues.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
There will not be a vote after this.